Hey friends, before we dive into tonight's story, did you know that nearly 80% of the people who watch these videos aren't subscribed? If you're enjoying this kind of content, consider hitting the subscribe button. It really helps a lot, and it keeps these long stories going. Also, I'd love to hear from you. What time is it right now where you are, and which city are you listening from tonight? And if these stories help you sleep, feel free to tap the thanks button to support the channel. It truly means a lot. All right, let's get into it. I can still feel the tremor in my hands as I replay that night. It was September 7th, 2024, an early Sunday shift, and I just wrapped up a routine check on a suspicious vehicle near the freeway exit when dispatch cut in through the radio. Unit 12A, we've got a 911 call from the Desert Sands Motel, room 12. Caller reports muffled screaming and a possible welfare check. Copy that? I acknowledged and punched the mic. Ramirez to dispatch, copy that? ETA 5 minutes. The Desert Sands sits alone off Interstate 40, a block of single-story rooms that look more abandoned than in service. The neon vacancy sign buzzes in and out, casting jagged pink and teal shadows across cracked concrete. As I rolled up, I could smell the mix of desert heat and stale odor, pool chemicals gone bad, industrial carpet dye, and something metallic that set my teeth on edge. I parked under a flickering lamp, boots crunching on gravel, and flipped on my flashlight. The motel office was dark, the sliding glass door smeared with fingerprints. I knocked twice, waited. No answer. Through the dusty window, I spotted a gaunt man hunched behind the counter, a night clerk with too many sleepless nights. When I pushed the door, it swung open, groaning on rusty hinges. "Sheriff's office," I said, voice low but firm. "I'm here about a 911 call. Heard crying?" His eyes were sunken, darting like rodents in a hole. "Yeah," he whispered. "Came through our landline, said she needed help, then a bang, like furniture dropping. No one's checked room 12 in days." He gestured down the hallway with a trembling hand. "Go slow." The corridor stretched off into darkness, beige walls marred by scuffs, each door numbered with fading black paint. At the far end, a single bulb sputtered, casting more shadow than light. My flashlight made the beams dance across torn wallpaper and warped floor tiles. I tried the doorknob on room 12, locked. I radioed dispatch for backup, then circled to the small window beside the door. It was cracked open, maybe 2 inches, just enough for someone to slip a hand through. I slid the latch and edged the pane higher until it caught. The air inside smelled of bleach and damp linen. I pushed the window fully up, propped the frame with my elbow, and climbed in, dropping silently onto threadbare carpet. The ceiling light was dead. Only the green glow of the digital clock on the nightstand pierced the gloom. 2:37. I hit the switch by the entrance. A single bulb snapped on, sputtering. The room revealed itself in patches, shadows swallowing half the corners. The bedspread was wrinkled, pillows askew. On the dresser, an old CRT TV glowed with static, the sound crackling through the room like distant radio chatter. The window's torn curtain fluttered, though the air was still. "Ma'am, sheriff's office," I called. "You okay in here?" No reply. My radio crackled. "Ramirez, backup en route, ETA 2 minutes. I found my partner's face reassuring until he wasn't there. I dropped my voice. "Stay close if you can hear me." The walls were paper thin. I heard the hum of the AC unit in the hallway, the distant roar of semis on the highway, and then, underneath it all, a soft, rhythmic thump from the closet, like someone leaning against the wall, shifting weight. My pulse kicked up. I drew my sidearm and eased toward the closet door, every instinct yelling to hold for backup. But if someone was hurt, I couldn't wait. I thumbed the lock off and swung the door open with my flashlight sweeping first. Nothing. Empty hangers and a threadbare robe hanging limp. My shoulders dropped, tension leaking out. Then the thump came again, this time from under the bed. I crouched and shone the beam underneath. Black leather boot tips. A man's face emerged, gaunt, wide-eyed, sweat beading on his forehead. He wore a gray housekeeping uniform, name tag peeling. Carl. I peered closer. "Get out," I ordered, voice tight. "Slow." He crawled forward, mask hanging loose, his hands splayed in front, palms up. I cuffed him without lowering the muzzle. "Stay there." I turned back to the bed. What had caused the call? I yanked the comforter aside. My stomach lurched. Dark red stains bloomed across the sheet. But no body, no blood pooled on the floor. The mattress was still damp, like it had absorbed something heavy. My radio lit up. Unit 12A backup on scene. Request status. I took a breath. One suspect in custody, no visual on victim. Room looks disturbed. I need an ambulance. Possibly injured party. I holstered my weapon, adrenaline twisting in my gut. Carl, the housekeeper, backed against the wall, eyes flicking between me and the bed. "He's not here," he said so softly, I almost missed it. "She's not here." I checked the nightstand drawer. Papers scattered, ID and credit cards gone. On the other side, the phone line was ripped out. I tugged on the receiver jack, wires hung loose like entrails. Whoever had called for help had disabled any chance of making another call. I knelt by the bed and ran my fingers through the sheet, lifting it slowly. The space underneath was empty except a single red hair, a long strand, coarse. It could have come from a rug or someone's sweater, but against the white sheet it was glaring. I pocketed it in an evidence bag. A low moan rose behind me. I spun, flashlight beam slicing the darkness. Nothing visible. The window curtain flickered. I told dispatch, "Unit 12A, I'm feeling something, like a presence. I need you to hit that hallway light." Moments later, a fluorescent tube outside buzzed and flooded the corridor with harsh white glare. I could see backup officers at the end of the hall, their silhouettes rigid. I waved them in, keeping my back to the room. When they crossed the threshold, the room's temperature plummeted. My breath puffed in clouds. I turned to Carl. "You stay with them," I said, nodding at the officers. Then I stepped back inside. The static on the TV had shifted from white noise to a faint voice. Someone whispering in low tones, but I couldn't make out words. I tapped the screen. It sputtered and went dead. The whispering stopped. I scanned the shadows. Under the bed, empty again. Closet, still empty. Everywhere I looked, only furniture and peeling wallpaper. And the stains. The stains were new, darker than before, seeping through the mattress seams, dripping toward the floor. My radio crackled. "Ramirez, you copy." I swallowed. Copy. Then I heard a creak behind me. Not the door, but the wall, like wood bending. I swung my light on the far corner. A loose panel stood slightly ajar, one of those old maintenance access boards. Behind it, pitch darkness. I holstered my radio mic, edged closer. Door's lock was snapped. A foul stink, rotting wood and something else, something coppery, wafted from inside the void. I reached out, fingertips brushing the rough edge. The wood gave way. I pressed my ear. A soft sob. Then a rasp. "Help me." My heart jackhammered. I radioed desperately. "Dispatch. Officer down, need immediate medivac and rescue team, possible hostage." The hallway light blinked off. In the gloom, the whisper turned into a scream, ear-piercing animal. I stumbled back, knocking over the dresser. The red comforter billowed in a sudden draft, sweeping across the floor like a living thing. My flashlight beam danced wildly as I fumbled for my backup. Then the panel slammed shut with a final thud. Silence reclaimed the room, thick, suffocating silence. I dropped to one knee, sweating despite the chill. I knew someone was trapped behind that wall, or maybe already gone. And I knew I'd made a choice. Open that panel or leave it sealed forever. The beam of my flashlight caught on something glinting at my feet, a thin silver key. I bent to pick it up, heart in my throat. It was too small for any motel lock I knew. That's when I heard it, breathing. Close behind me. Slow, deliberate, waiting. I spun, light slicing the dark, and saw nothing but the ruined comforter. The breathing stopped. I reached for the key again, knuckles white. A single question echoed in my mind, louder than any radio call or thunderous scream. Who, or what, had given it to me? I tucked the silver key into my pocket with shaky fingers, the metal cold against my palm. Every instinct screamed at me to bolt for the door, to get out of that room and never look back. But the faint echo of that sob from behind the panel pulled me forward, rooted me in place. I swallowed against the quicksand feeling in my throat and forced myself to breathe steadily, in through the nose, out through the mouth, counting each cycle like a mantra. The corridor light flashed back on, bathing the shredded comforter in the pool of spilled carpet dye in harsh white glare. My backup stood at the threshold, their weapons trained on me, eyes wide. "Officer down, status?" one of them asked, voice strained. I pointed at the collapsed dresser and the robe that lay twisted on the floor. "No injuries yet. Something's behind the maintenance panel." I heard her. Maybe both of them. They moved in, flashlights skittering across walls and floor, illuminating the dusty motelscape in roaring arcs. I kept my hand on the key, as if it might be my only lifeline. An EMT edged past, swiping the panel with a gloved hand. "We'll need tools," he said. "Seal this place off. Don't let anyone leave." The hallway door slammed shut behind them, the lock clicking with finality. I leaned against the wall, raising my flashlight to the ceiling vent. The metal grill rattled as though something heavy had shifted above. My heart slammed. I remembered a case from the academy. Something about people living in the crawl spaces of old buildings, surviving off rats and old vending machines. But this was a single room, a one-off. It made no sense. Who would trap two people in one room? Unless it wasn't people at all. From the panel came another groan, deeper this time, like a man's sob twisting into a guttural gasp. I stepped forward, light slicing the narrow opening. There was a woman's pale face, dirt-smudged and tear-streaked, pressed against the boards. Her eyes flicked up at me, wild, desperate. "Help!" she rasped. Her lips trembled. I crouched and reached in, but she recoiled, slamming a fist against the back of the panel. "Easy," I said, voice softer. "It's me. You're safe." She shook her head, tears pooling in her eyes. "You don't understand. He's gone mad." Her voice cracked. "He watches me, waits." Something skittered above my head. I looked up to see a shadow slip across the ceiling tiles, then vanish. My flashlight bobbed as I followed it, stomach knotting. "Who's gone mad?" I asked, turning back to her. She pounded again, harder. "He's in here with me," she whispered. "He's under the bed. He killed her." My blood went cold. "Killed who?" She hesitated, voice breaking. "The other girl, room 11. He left her there, bleeding." I pictured room 11, the adjacent door. No one had even reported activity there. It was supposed to be empty, as was 12 until tonight. The EMT knocked the panel aside with a pry bar. We threw the cover open. The crawl space was narrow, barely 3 feet tall, and smelled of rot and rust. The woman scrambled out, sobbing, her pajamas ripped and dirt-streaked. She clutched her side as though wounded, though I saw no blood. Behind her, in the dark recesses, a shape stirred, thin frame, pale skin, wild hair plastered to a gaunt face. Eyes that reflected my flashlight like shards of broken glass. He stumbled forward with a keening wail, limbs jerking at odd angles. His lips pulled back in a grin that was more skull than flesh. He held something in his hand, a nail, spattered with dark flecks. I raised my weapon. "Stay back," I shouted. He froze, then dropped to all fours and skittered back into the blackness, disappearing beyond the end of the vent. The woman collapsed into my arms, shuddering. My partner Ranier burst in, rifle at ready, followed by 2 more deputies. We secured the room in a tight triangle, flashlights trembling. I asked the woman her name. "Megan," she sobbed. "They call him the housekeeper." Ranier's face went pale. "Housekeeper?" he echoed. "Our Carl?" Megan nodded, face twisted in fear. He snapped," she said. "I found him in the office. He said the rooms were hungry. He's been feeding them." Her words hung in the stale air like a curse. I pressed Ranier. "Feeding who?" "What are you talking about?" Megan pressed a hand to her chest, as if bracing herself. "The motel," she said. "The walls, the rooms, they're alive." She glanced at the peeling wallpaper where faint web-like lines traced across the surface. They consume people. The deputies shared uneasy looks. An EMT helped Megan to a chair. She was hysterical but spoke in clear English. "I saw her in room 11, Julie Thurston. She checked in 2 nights ago. I heard screaming and called the front desk. Carl answered. He said he'd handle it. He never came back down. Julie was in the panel when I came in, her body." She clamped her lips shut, tears streaming. My head reeled. I tried to reconcile this with the logical training seared into my mind. "We found carpentry tools in the maintenance closet," I said. "You think he built those panels?" She nodded. It was already rigged. He didn't build it. He just closed them in." The bulb flickered again. Static sputtered from the TV set, dead for hours. The hiss resolved into a rush of whispering voices. Words half-formed. "Stay, hunger, feed, join us." The deputies exchanged looks. Deputy Haley checked the hallway. She signaled all clear, though the corridor light was dying again. I turned back, every nerve ending ablaze. Megan stared at me, eyes hollow. "He's coming," she whispered. "He let me out so he could feed the rooms again." The static swelled, and I realized it wasn't the TV. It was the old speaker behind the maintenance panel. The vents carried the sound, playing over and over. Ranier put a hand on my shoulder. "We should move Megan," he said. "Get her out of here before this place takes more." I nodded. "Cover the door, nobody in or out without me." We formed a perimeter as I helped Megan to her feet. She shivered in the early morning chill seeping through the window. I handed her to Ranier. "Deputy, get her to an ambulance now. Keep her talking. Ask her something about her life. Keep her grounded." Megan's eyes fixed on the bed, where the comforter lay in a perfect square, untouched since I'd pried it loose. Why don't you wonder why I'm not covered in blood?" she whispered, voice hollow. "I should be dead. They should have taken me." My stomach twisted. Haley shone her light at the mattress. No stains, no sheet displacement. I reached down and touched the fabric. It felt alive, slightly warm, pulsing under my fingers like a heartbeat. A low rumble shook the walls. The ceiling vent clattered, tiles rattling loose. Dust billowed. From deep within the panel, a scraping sound, like fingernails against drywall. Megan broke free of Ranier's grasp and ran to the closet door. She yanked it open. Inside was nothing but empty hangers. She looked at me with terror. "He's behind you!" she shrieked. I spun, glancing at the far wall. Shadows danced. A figure stepped into the beam. Tall, gaunt, wearing a suit of hotel-issued gray trousers and a blood-stained housekeeping shirt. His face was a mask of pale, stretched skin, his eyes black pits. He held Julie's watch in one hand, her bracelet still clasped around his index finger. He tilted his head, as if listening to a distant song only he could hear. I leveled my rifle. "Carl, housekeeper, stop." The thing paused, cocked its head, then sprinted at me, limbs thrashing. My finger tensed on the trigger as the room erupted into chaos. The static screamed, lights exploded, showers of plaster rained down. Megan screamed. The other deputies opened fire. Bang, 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 bullets tearing through air and flesh. The figure stumbled, the bullets catching its shoulder with a wet thunk, but it didn't slow. I fired reflexively, the report deafening in the narrow room. The muzzle flash illuminated half-shredded wallpaper, red sprays across the panel boards, across the bedspread, across his face. He screeched, a sound that bent the air, and crashed into the dresser, sending it skidding across the floor. The runnels of dust snaked through the beam like smoke. Then silence, violent, thick. We stood panting in the wreckage, rifles smoking. The figure lay sprawled, twitching. Each convulsion stilled my heart. I stepped forward, boot crunching on glass. I aimed at his forehead for a clean shot, protocol, lethal threat, etc. I blinked as I recognized his face beneath the blood and dim light. It was the clerk, Frank. My pulse froze. Ranier grabbed my arm. "Don't do it, Alex," he said. "He's already—" He swallowed. "He's already dead." I stared at Frank's slack features, his spilled blood mingling with the spilled dye, and at the bullet holes in the wall behind him, at the panel slats stamped with scratch marks a foot above. Then, Megan's watch, Julie's bracelet. The watch and the bracelet, the things he'd been carrying, the trophies of 2 vanished women. I holstered my rifle and knelt beside him. He gurgled, eyes unfocused. "It's hungry," he rasped. "Takes them." The static returned, words clear now. "Feed, feed." I pressed the key in my pocket as though it might open the panel again. But there was no panel now, only shards of wood and gaping darkness. I radioed dispatch. "This is Unit 12A, situation critical. Suspect neutralized, not sure how to proceed." My voice shook. The corridor light hummed back on. I heard sirens coming down the highway. The motel seemed to settle around me, the walls vibrating like a drum. As I stood, Frank's twitching eyes met mine. He gave a weak, crooked smile and whispered, "He never left." Then he went still. I pocketed his name tag and the silver key, stepping over the ruin and out into the hallway. The neon vacancy sign pulsed through the window, casting the corridor in restless light. I listened to the static fading in my radio earpiece. Who, or what, still waits behind those panels, hungry for the next soul? I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that panel door swinging open, heard Megan's gasp, felt the chill of that crawlspace air creeping up my spine. By dawn, I was already at my desk in the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Station, rifling through motel blueprints and incident reports. I taped Frank's name tag and the silver key to a manila folder labeled Desert Sands Motel, Unit 12A. But it felt less like evidence and more like a burial shroud. Deputy Ranier eyed me as I spread pages across my cluttered desk. "You're not seriously going back, are you?" he asked, voice heavy with concern, or maybe disbelief. I didn't look up. "I need to map the crawl space," I said, tapping a set of grainy engineering schematics. If Carl rigged that panel, he had to build the tunnel somewhere. This motel sits above old service ducts and abandoned sewer lines. I want to know where. He hesitated, then shrugged. "You sure you're fit for duty?" I managed a tight smile. No better time to check than while it's still fresh. Around us, the station hummed. Copiers, radios, dispatch calls. I grabbed my jacket and the folder, slinging it over my shoulder like a shield. By mid-morning, I was back on Interstate 40, the sun low but already merciless. The Desert Sands Motel looked worse in daylight. Graffiti on cinder block walls, sun-bleached vacancy sign hanging loose, broken bottles and cigarette butts scattered across the parking lot. I met Ranier and Deputy Haley in the office. Megan was gone, transferred to the county hospital for further evaluation, but her scribbled witness statement lay on the counter, reeking faintly of antiseptic. Ranier handed me a compact flashlight, 2 extra magazines, and a roll of crime scene tape. Haley produced a portable camera and a thermal imager. We moved down the hall toward room 12's door. The old bulb over 12 sputtered, casting the hallway in a jaundiced glow. I slipped the silver key into the lock. Nothing. I turned it anyway. It clicked, but the deadbolt didn't budge. The lock was rewired from the inside. I cursed under my breath and jiggled the doorknob. "Door's super secure now," I reported. "Ah," he reinforced it. Haley shone the thermal imager at the walls. "Cold spots here," she said, pointing at a patch near the baseboard. The temperature reading dipped several degrees, consistent with an enclosed void. I pried off the baseboard with a screwdriver from my belt. Behind it, a dark gap, roughly a foot high, extended back into the wall. The edges were rough, splintered wood fresh with sawdust. "They started here," I said, leaning in. I handed a small GoPro camera down the crevice. Haley turned it on, feeding its feed to my handheld monitor. In the glow of the tiny LED, we saw wood frame supports, a narrow corridor barely wide enough for a crouching man. Dust motes floated in the beam like ghosts. I knelt and pressed my ear to the wall. Far down the tunnel, I heard a faint drip. Water or blood? A distant scuffle, too muted to pinpoint. My pulse hammered. "We need to get in," I said. Ranier hesitated. "We don't have a warrant for that crawl space," he objected. I pressed the key against his chest. "This is our warrant. Evidence of potential homicide, kidnapping, structural tampering. We breach now, or we lose our chance." He looked at Haley, who nodded. She slid her utility knife down the frame and cut the wire staples holding the wood in place. We pried the panel free, revealing the entry. A thin draft of cold air snaked out. I flicked on my flashlight and tested the first step. 6-inch gap, metal bolt, protruding like a tongue. With a grunt, I dropped through. The crawl space was narrow, maybe 5 feet across, ceiling height just above my crouched shoulders. The air was fetid, a sick mix of sewage, mold, and something iron-sharp. My boots crunched on broken ceramic tiles. I could hear Haley and Ranier sliding in behind me. Their voices were small, reverent. Behind us, the entrance panel clanged back into place. I switched to the GoPro, strapping it to my chest so the light beam tracked my movement. We followed the tunnel under the hallway, beneath 2 rooms over. The walls were stud frame, covered in drywall, but at every foot the plaster had been gouged. Scratches like talon marks. Blood spatter dotted the beams. My legs burned as I shuffled. Sweat beaded on my forehead despite the chill. After 50 yards, the tunnel forked. To the left was a rusted pipe dripping liquid that pooled at our knees. The smell turned sour. Haley hovered, face pale. "That's not water," she whispered. I knelt and tested the pool with a gloved fingertip. The fluid rippled. It was warm and sticky. I drew my finger back, nearly gagging. "Collect a sample," I ordered. She snapped a vial from her belt and worked quickly. I moved to the right fork. The ceiling dropped lower. I crawled on hands and knees. The beam of my flashlight caught a flash of white. Folded sheets, pillows, a rusted mattress frame. We'd reached a hidden storage cavity. Bits of leather, fabric scraps, even a half-rotted teddy bear lay strewn. The walls were scrawled with names and dates. May 2019, June 2021. Several in 2024, including Julie, scrawled in smeared red. I radioed for backup to secure the scene. Ranier photographed everything. "Megan said Julie was in panel when I came in," I murmured. "Carl left her here." I shuddered as I envisioned Julie Thurston trapped until death. My legs trembled. Every fiber of my being strained against the horror soaked into those walls. From the adjacent fork came a low moan. My gut seized. I pointed my light down the narrower passage. In the gloom, I saw a huddled shape, small, hunched, rocking. I signaled to Haley. She crept forward, light shaking. "Sir, sorry if I scare you," she said softly. "We're here to help." The figure raised its head. It was a child, maybe 6 or 7, threadbare clothes caked in grime, hair matted, eyes wide, unblinking. A pool of something dark beneath him, soaking his pants. I rushed over, heart hammering. "Hey, buddy, it's okay. We're going to get you out." He stared, mouth opening, but no sound came. Then, quick as a flash, he screamed, a high-pitched wail that reverberated through the tunnel. I yanked him to me, cutting his bonds. Old wires twisted tight around his wrists and ankles. He flailed, backing into the dark, then froze, staring past me. I turned, flashlight beam swinging to reveal the silhouette of a man at the far end, tall, skeletal, head tilted. "Don't move," I barked. The man took a step forward. Carl, or whatever had become of him. His skin was slack, eyes socket deep, limbs crooked. Behind him, shadows coalesced into shapes, indistinct, shifting. As he advanced, the crawlspace seemed to pulse, walls throbbing like a living ribcage. The child whimpered and swung at me, terrified. I scooped him up and backed toward the entrance. The man hissed, lunged, but the narrow corridor prevented pursuit. Haley and Ranier sealed the panel behind us. I slammed it shut, locking it with the silver key. On hands and knees, I pulled the child through, his small body limp, tears streaking his cheeks. We heard the panel scrape behind us, scratches as if something were clawing to get out. We burst into the hallway, sunlight searing our eyes. EMTs flooded in, taking the child. He clung to a blanket, unresponsive but alive. I watched as they loaded him onto a gurney. My legs trembled so hard I nearly collapsed. Haley knelt beside me. "We have, 3 bodies in that tunnel? Julie, the other girl Megan saw?" She trailed off. I nodded, stomach twisting. That night, back at home, I sat in darkness and stared at photos of the child's eyes on my phone. Vacant, broken. I thought about that huddled form, the scrawled names, the walls that breathe and feed. I thought about the silver key on my nightstand, taunting me with its promise of another door. Sleep wouldn't come. But at least I had tangible evidence now. Blood samples, DNA swabs, and a terrified survivor's testimony. Tomorrow, I'd write my report. I'd testify, brief homicide, start the long process of identifying the victims, and structural investigators would tear apart that building from foundation to roof. But tonight, I sat in the silence, listening for the faint hum of static, wondering where the next panel might be, and whether I'd ever be ready to open it again. When I woke the next morning, the photograph of that little boy's hollow eyes was still open on my phone. I stared at them until my coffee grew cold, then, dressed in uniform with hands that trembled more than I liked to admit, I told myself I was going back one last time, just to collect the last pieces of evidence, to close off the scene for good. But deep down, I knew I was chasing something I would never outrun. The station was quiet as I arrived, everyone still slogging through paperwork from the night before. I met Haley in the hallway outside homicide. She handed me a stack of lab reports. The fluid from the tunnel was a mix of decayed human proteins and industrial solvents used in late 1960s motels. The hair strand matched Julie Thurston. Blood on the carpet tile was a match for Megan. The child's DNA was unknown. I tucked the reports into my vest pocket and nodded. "Let's finish it," I said. Ranier was waiting outside Desert Sands, his patrol cruiser idling in the lot. His face was drawn in pre-dawn light. "You sure you want to do this alone?" he asked. "We've got crime scene techs coming." I forced a grin. "I need to see the office again, where Carl first went off the rails." He shook his head. "All right, but I'm on comms. You say one word, I'm in there." I patted his shoulder. "Roger that." The motel office felt smaller in daylight. A cramped space with a pool of fluorescent light falling over a sagging countertop. I pulled on latex gloves and stepped behind the desk, nose wrinkling at the stale coffee grounds and industrial carpet cleaner. On the back wall, the landline jack had been pried free, wires frayed. I traced a fingertip along the exposed copper, then pulled out my mini flashlight and inspected the underside of the counter. There, scratched into the wood in Carl's spidery handwriting, was a date. August 15th, 2024, 5 days after Julie checked in, and a single word below it: feed. My heart stuttered. I took out my notebook and copied the carving. Then I tapped the desk phone against the underside again. No tone. I pressed the receiver button, the red one that cuts power to the speakers so you can listen unnoticed. Static hissed. I dimmed the lights and held the receiver close. There it was again, low scratching, like something moving just behind the wall. I pulled the cord. The scratching stopped, then scratched at the counter's edge. I dropped the phone, cold sweat breaking out. Ranier's voice crackled in my earpiece. "Status?" I exhaled loud. Probably just a rodent, but mark it, entry point. I straightened and stepped out into the lobby. Haley met me with blueprints and a small thermal camera rig. "They've mapped the tunnel," she said. "They're ready to fill it in after you sweep the rest." I nodded. "Good." I paused by the glass window overlooking the parking lot. A lone tumbleweed had caught under the bumper of a rusted Chevy. Every breeze stirred it like a restless ghost. We moved back along the hallway to room 12. The door looked unchanged. Same scuffs, same faded 12. I slid the silver key into the deadbolt. This time, it turned and unlocked with a faint click. The door swung open to the smell of bleach and old carpet fiber. Flashlight beams crisscrossed the empty room. My gaze snagged on the dresser drawer where Julie's ID had sat, now empty. I knelt and swept the carpet threads with a lint brush. Under the bed I found fragments of black plastic, pieces of a hotel keycard reader. Haley photographed each shard. "He must have smashed the reader to cut power," she whispered, then rigged the panel. I shivered. He sealed them in to let the walls feed off them, I muttered. We moved to the closet. The hangers were still missing. I could see new, shallow grooves where Carl had scratched initials. The victims' names, I realized. carving their presence into the wood itself. I stepped into the tiny crawlspace once more. The entrance panel was off its hinges, the silver key lying on the floor. I picked it up. "He left it behind," I said, voice echoing in the tight tunnel. Ranier's voice came faintly. "They're ready to backfill as soon as you clear." I wiped sweat from my brow and took a deep breath. "Let's go." Back in the office, I interviewed the night clerk's replacement, some kid named Marcus, barely out of high school. His eyes were wide, haunted. "I heard the static," he said. "I swear, at night I'd hear it. Voices from behind the walls. I thought it was old wiring, tinnitus, something." I nodded, scribbling. "Then I heard scratches." He swallowed and nodded, voice trembling. "Felt like nails. And once I swear I saw a face peek through the reception window, though no one was out there." My chest tightened. "You left the desk and checked?" Marcus nodded vigorously. "I ran out, came back an hour later, and the door was open. The window latch was unhooked." I closed my notebook and stood. "Thank you. I'll need you to come down for more questions." He looked as if he might crumble to the floor. I patted his arm. "You did the right thing." The sun was higher now as I stepped back into the hallway. The corridor smelled of stale air and disinfectant. I tapped my comm. "Haley, status?" She said they'd started the backfill, shoring crews crawling in behind me. I grabbed my flashlight and checked room 11, the next door over. The lock was fused. Someone had glued it. I forced it open with a shim. Inside, the bed was neatly made. No stains, no sign of disturbance. But the carpet was wet, as though something thick had been spilled. I knelt and pried back the edge of the rug. Beneath was a manila envelope sealed with dried blood. Inside, Julie Thurston's journal pages. Frantic entries about nightmares, hearing voices, feeling the walls breathe. The last page was scrawled in shaky letters, "Maybe they need me next." My stomach rolled as I closed the door. I radioed Ranier. "We've got evidence here, journal entries. We're going to need all patients checked for trauma." I interrupted myself with a shake of the head. "But I'm done with this place." I walked to the exit doors, the evening light slanting through dusty glass. Outside, the backfill trucks rumbled into position. Men in hard hats busy sealing the tunnel. The neon vacancy sign flickered once, then went dark for good. As I climbed into my cruiser, I realized I'd left the silver key on the front desk. I grabbed it, turning it over in my hand. It felt warm, almost alive. I pocketed it, then drove away, glancing in the rearview mirror at the motel shrinking behind me like a wound closing. Later, at home, I set the key on my nightstand and lay awake until dawn. I dreamt of walls breathing, of doors opening to emptiness, of that little boy's eyes following me down endless hallways. When morning came, I checked the news. An abandoned pump station north of town had collapsed, trapping 2 workers. Rescue crews found one alive, digging his way out. The other, a middle-aged man, was missing. No trace. I shook my head and reached for my coffee. I don't know whether to file that under coincidence or something far darker. The world feels like a set of old motel rooms now. Rooms stocked with hidden panels, hungry walls, and keys that open nothing but nightmares. And I keep wondering, late at night, when I'll hear that faint static behind my own walls, and whether I'll be brave enough to pry them open once more. I woke to the shrill ring of my phone. Dispatch calling for an update. The room was dim, curtains still drawn against dawn's glare. My head throbbed. Exhaustion had finally caught up. I rubbed my eyes, sat up on the edge of the bed, and stared at the silver key on my nightstand, glinting in the weak lamplight. I left it there on a dare to myself, thinking I'd toss it in a drawer, forget about that motel and its hungry walls. But there it was, calling me back again. "Ramirez here," I answered, voice gravelly. "Unit 12A," dispatch said. "We have a report. You want to hear this?" I crushed the key in my fist. "Go ahead." County coroner has 2 unidentified remains found in a crawlspace beneath an abandoned truck stop off Route 66. Body patterns match what we saw at Desert Sands. Both are female, mid-20s, presumed missing since last summer. We've got your hair samples, keycard fragments. Everything points back to you. They want you on the scene. I closed my eyes. Even on my day off, I wouldn't be free. "Understood. I'll meet the coroner out there." I hung up and swung my legs to the floor. My knees creaked. I pocketed the key and pulled on my uniform shirt-like armor. By the time I reached the station, Ranier was waiting. He looked sober. "You okay?" he asked. I held up the key. "They want bodies, more like confirmations." I dropped the key onto the desk, watching it skid across spilled coffee grounds. "Let's gear up." At the old truck stop, the sun was low, an orange smear behind the derelict pumps. Sheriff's vehicles and coroner's vans blocked the lot. Yellow tape flapped in the breeze. We ducked under it, greeted by the coroner, Dr. Schultz, who led us to a service hatch just beside the restroom. The crawlspace smelled like stale beer and rot. Schultz knelt by the first body, covered in a white sheet. He peeled it back. The remains were skeletal in places, flesh dried to crackling parchment. I recognized the curled strand of hair I'd bagged months ago. "Julie Thurston," Schultz murmured, recording in his notebook. He moved to the second set of remains. A wedding ring on one finger, a few strands of blonde hair entwined around the wrist. "Megan," he said quietly. "Hospital records match." My stomach twisted. Schultz pointed at the corrugated metal walls. Rust flakes littered the floor. "He dug here," Schultz said. "Ran a tunnel from under the women's restroom, back through the maintenance bay." I traced my flashlight across the uneven joints. The walls flexed faintly, groaned. I raised an eyebrow. "Did you hear that?" Schultz frowned. I shook my head. A deputy knelt at the far end, pointing at a third skeleton emerging from the dusty soil. Unknown, no prints, no reports. He tapped berries of dried blood on the collarbone. Probably another go-between. My heart hammered. 3 bodies. Who else? I clicked off my flashlight and stared at the dark earth. A crow cawed on the roof above, wings beating against metal sheeting. There was nothing else to process, no time. Schultz sent fingerprints back to HQ. We climbed out, head spinning. That night, I sat at home going over my notes. The silver key lay on the coffee table next to my service weapon. I picked it up and turned it over, as though reading hidden runes carved into the metal. I thought about the motel, the truck stop, the way walls could feed. It didn't make sense. Tunnels don't grow in buildings like veins. People don't carve names into drywall. And yet the evidence was damning. The phone rang again. Dispatch. "Ramirez, urgent. Another body found. Identified as a missing bartender from Bakersfield. Clothes match what we recovered from that Motel 12 room. They found her stuffed behind the laundry chute at a burnt-out Holiday Inn in Barstow." I ran my hand through my hair. "On my way." I drove through the night, the miles fluorescent in my headlight beams. At each exit, I saw the same lonely motels and abandoned rest areas, the same blinking vacancy signs. I pictured panels in every wall, hungry for flesh. It felt like a fever dream. In Barstow, the burned-out Holiday Inn was cordoned off. Charred beams sagged, a skeleton of girders, debris smoldered. Investigators crouched amid ash and rubble. We found the chute, a gaping hole behind the laundry room. Inside, another silver key. Same make, same scratches. I picked it up, heat warping the metal. I turned to see Rainier pale beside me. "It's everywhere," he said. I realized with a jolt that I'd never stopped the thing. I'd sealed one panel, filled one tunnel, but the pattern replicated. Tunnels sprouted under diners, motels, gas stations, hungry walls waiting for fresh terror. Someone, something, was feeding them, spreading through roadside America. I stood in the black cinders, boots crunching, heart thundering. The wind whispered across the charred wood. It sounded like static, like distant voices calling out for help. I clenched the silver key, my hands trembled. I drove home as dawn broke, sky pale blue, stained with smoke. At my front door, I paused. The air felt thick. I reached into my pocket for my keys, only to find not my house key but the motel key. My pulse spiked. My own key ring, in my uniform pocket, lay empty. The motel key gleamed at me, demanding I use it. I backed away, head spinning. My own door was locked. I fumbled for my phone, no signal. I turned to the facade of my house. Silent siding, dark windows. My reflection in the glass looked gaunt, hollow-eyed. Behind me, a faint tapping, like fingernails against a panel. I tore off my service badge, dropped it in the driveway. The key burned in my palm. I looked up the street. Neighbors' houses, neat lawns, nothing to suggest horror lurking behind painted walls. And yet, I heard the tapping again, closer, coming from inside my own front door. I swallowed, stepping toward the keyhole. The key begged to turn, to unlock something in my mind, in the world. I hesitated, breath caught in my chest. One more panel to open, one more victim to find, or maybe the final truth, buried in the dark spaces beneath towns. I raised the key. My hand shook. What would I find on the other side? I remembered the exact moment the alarm in my cruiser buzzed to life. 2:17 hours on June 14th, 2023. I was parked just off the shoulder of Interstate 40, watching the neon motel sign pulse like a heartbeat. Vacancy. My partner, Barnes, was fiddling with his coffee thermos, the engine's hum drowned out by the whisper of desert wind rattling the cracked asphalt. Dispatch cut in sharp and clipped. 10:22. We've got a hang-up call from room 12 at the Highland Vista Motel. No other details. Check welfare. I glanced over at Barnes. He shrugged. Probably some kid in there messing with the phone, he muttered, voice low and calm. The kind of calm that comes from handling roadside shootings and two-car pile-ups without blinking. We slid out of the cruiser, boots crunching gravel, and approached the weathered front desk. The clerk, a petite woman with dark circles under her eyes, looked up like we'd just woken her from a nightmare. She introduced herself as Marisol. Room 12 called 911, she said, voice barely above a whisper. All I heard was a moan, then nothing. Line went dead. She handed me a scuffed keycard, the edges worn. He checked in 2 hours ago, paid cash, no name on file, just a hooded guy, said he'd head out first thing. I flashed my badge. Any idea why he called? She shook her head, curling her fingers around a mug of stale coffee. Number I peeked through the peephole, saw him huddled in the corner with his hands over his ears, rocking back and forth. Looked terrified. I keyed the mic on my radio. Dispatch, this is 4 Adam 12, on scene at Highland Vista Motel, requesting backup code 41028. Barnes cut in. Make that 2 units. I waited for acknowledgement before slipping through the grimy lobby door. The hallway smelled of mildew and burnt ozone from the flickering fluorescent lights overhead. Orange carpet stripes led us to room 12, a pale blue door scratched near the knob. I slid the keycard into the reader. Click. Barnes nudged it open with his boot. We stepped into bone-deep darkness, flashlights flicking to life. The beam caught the tangle of sheets at the foot of the bed, soaked through with something dark. I advanced slowly, eyes darting to every shadow. The room's sole window was curtained, but I could see the nocturnal desert outside, black silhouettes of mesquite trees against a starless sky. "Sir?" "Officer here," I called softly, voice echoing off stained walls. No answer, just the drip, 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 somewhere behind me. I pivoted. The bathroom door was ajar. Barnes crept inside, illuminating chipped porcelain and a cracked mirror. He waved me over. Water was pooling around the drain, fresh, clear, cascading in from the sink faucet at a glacial trickle. "I didn't see any pipes leaking in the lobby," he said, crouching to inspect. Everything looked dry on the exterior pipes. He gestured to the shower curtain, drawn shut. Reluctantly, I reached across the threshold and yanked it back. Empty stall, no sign of the tenant or any equipment that could explain the water. I turned back into the room. My light swept over a small table near the closet. Dozens of cassette tapes spread out like evidence markers, each one hand-labeled in black ink. Hotel, Highland Vista, June 10th, June 11th, June 12th, and one with only scrawled June 13th. My pulse spiked. Barnes crossed his arms. He's been recording himself every night. I bent to pick up the June 13th tape. The label had the motel number and a shaky symbol I couldn't decipher. I pocketed it and felt, before I heard it, the low static through the room's intercom speaker. The hairs on my neck prickled. Barnes froze too. Then a rasping whisper, so faint I thought it was inside my skull. "Help." "Me." My stomach clenched. I thumbed the radio. "Dispatch for Adam 12. We have auditory disturbance on intercom. Stand by." But the intercom was silent again, as though nothing occurred. The whisper replayed in my mind like damage to a worn record. I swept my beam around, settling on the vent above the closet door. The grill shimmered in the light, small dents around the screws. I pointed. "Over here." Barnes joined me. He knelt and unscrewed the grill with his penknife, metal rattling against concrete. We both peered into the darkness of the duct. Another breath, a wet, slithering inhale. I swallowed hard. "Did you hear that?" Barnes didn't answer. He shone his light down the shaft. The walls glistened with condensation, and somewhere deep something moved. I gripped my sidearm, knuckles white. "There's someone in there." Barnes's voice was hushed. Could be a kid or an animal. He cut himself off as the intercom crackled again, this time with a wail that wasn't human, like someone twisted metal into a scream. My chest tightened. "We're pulling him out," I ordered. Barnes radioed for medics and additional units. I spun to the door, poised to drag the tenant out by force if necessary. Footsteps pounded in the hallway. 2 cruisers blazed in, red and blue lights flickering through the peephole. Reinforcements took positions in the hallway as I yanked the door open. I stepped out, drawing in a breath of stale corridor air, then turned back inside, only to find the tapes gone. "Barnes," I whispered. He emerged from the closet, eyes wide. "They're gone," he said. "All of them." He pointed at the table, empty. The intercom sparked, and a guttural growl slithered through the speakers. I grabbed the receiver next to the phone. "Dispatch." The line was dead. The only sound was that growl resonating through the motel's veins. My flashlight beam quivered as I advanced toward the vent, every instinct screaming to get out. Then a voice, louder, more urgent, ripped through the grill. "They're here! They're here!" The words were soaked in terror, each syllable dragging into an unearthly echo. I staggered back. Barnes shouted, "Get the door!" Officers forced the door open. The hallway flooded in, lights cutting through the gloom. I turned, expecting an empty room, but instead, a single cassette tape lay at my feet. I picked it up with gloved fingers. It bore just one date, June 14th. I looked up at Barnes. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst. The tape began to spin in my hand, a whisper pressing against my palm. "Don't leave me." And then, a sudden snap of the overhead light, plunging us into silence. Barnes yanked the backup lights on, but the moment they flickered over the room, everything snapped back to darkness, as though the motel itself inhaled and pressed us into silence. My heart thundered in the pitch black. I could feel Barnes's hand on my shoulder, cold and trembling. For a breathless second, we stood there, two officers swallowed by the void of a room that shouldn't have existed in such darkness. No power, no windows, no escape. Then I heard it again, the rasping whisper through the vent. "Please, don't go." It dragged through the ductwork like a rusted hinge, shaking dust down onto my cap. Barnes cursed under his breath. I fumbled for the door frame, my flashlight still clipped to my belt. "We need to get out," I said, voice hoarse. He nodded, fumbling in his pocket for his radio. The buttons stuck together. "Dispatch for Adam 12, need immediate evac." The line crackled, but no answer, only static. We backed toward the door, feet sliding on wet carpet. Behind us, the growl tremored in the vents. It sounded angry, animal maybe, but no creature on earth emits a sound so full of sorrow and rage. I kicked the door open and tumbled into the hallway. Barnes slammed it shut, deadbolt snapping into place. Outside, the other officers were huddled at the threshold, weapons drawn, lights dancing over mold-spotted walls. Sergeant Ruiz was the first through. His bulk blocked the corridor. "What happened?" he demanded, breath ragged. I swallowed. Power went out, intercom, vent, heard voices. I pressed a shaking hand to my helmet lamp. And the tapes disappeared. He squinted into the gloom. "We heard them call for you, then nothing." He turned to Corporal Hale. "Get a status on the breaker box." Hale sprinted off down the corridor. Moments later, sparks flickered from the utility closet across the hall. The breaker box door lay open. Hale crouched inside, toggling switches. Nothing. Then he slapped a panel. Lights roared back on, but only in the hallway. Room 12's door remained a dead black square, unresponsive. Sergeant Ruiz and I exchanged a look. He motioned for me to take point. Barnes and I crept back to the door, inhaling the musty motel air that smelled of hot wiring and stale fear. I slipped the deadbolt with my keycard, still responding, then the latch. "On 3, I whispered. 1, 2, 3. I pushed. The door moaned open. My mag light stabbed into the room first, carving a swath of clean white through the low ceiling. Everything lay exactly as before. Sheets tangled at the foot. Water pooled in the bathroom. Closet door slightly ajar. Only now, behind the mattress, a figure crouched. I flicked my light. There. A man, shirt drenched, eyes wild, face streaked with tears and grime. He was shaking violently, rocking like Marisol described. Barnes and I rushed in. I reached for my cuffs. "Sir, hands where I can see them," I ordered softly. He flinched, stuttering. They're under the floorboards." I frowned. under the floorboards. The carpet looked seamless. I scanned the floor with my light. No seams, no raised edges. "Who's under there?" His voice tremored. They live below the walls. They move when I sleep. They breathe." He pointed at the floor vent near the bathroom. I heard them scrape, saw them press their faces at the grill. I moved to that vent. Barnes knelt and pried the cover off. He aimed his light inside. Nothing visible, just the duct stretching into shadow. The man started sobbing. "They want me to stay, they need me to stay." Then, without warning, a voice behind us rasped, "Now, they need you to stay." We spun. No one. Only the silhouette of the unsteady guest against the far wall. My pistol came up, beam slicing the dim corners. Barnes flanked him. "Who said that?" I demanded, voice rising. The guest ducked, shoulders trembling. "It wasn't me." He pointed at the bathroom. "In the mirror." I trained my light on the cracked bathroom mirror. At first, I saw only splintered reflection. My uniform, Barnes's face tight with fear. Then, just for a heartbeat, a pair of eyes pressed against the glass from the other side of the wall, too close, too human. Pale, flecked with red, staring right at me. I jumped back and slammed into Barnes. He shouted, "Get him out of here!" We half-dragged the man toward the door. But as we passed the bed, something caught my eye. Something I hadn't noticed before. A faint scrawling on the headboard, shallow lines gouged into the wood. "Don't forget us." My stomach turned. I jerked the mag light toward it. Barnes saw too. "Backing up!" Barnes yelled, pressing the guest against the wall. We forced him outside, shutting the door behind us. The corridor lights flickered again. I glanced back. Room 12 sat in dead black, the words glowing faintly in the gloom as though they were carved from shadow. Before I could move, the guest ripped his arms free. He bolted down the hallway, bare feet hitting the carpet. Adrenaline kicked in. Barnes and I followed, calling for him to stop. His ragged breathing echoed off the walls. He burst through the lobby doors and into the parking lot. The night air hit me like ice. Out here, headlights from the cruisers carved long beams through the desert darkness. The guest stumbled and collapsed on the gravel, curled in a ball. Rain had begun to fall, fat droplets that hissed and steamed on the asphalt. I crouched beside him. His eyes flickered open. "They're outside," he whispered, voice cracking. "Watching." I swept the cruiser lights across the dunes. Nothing moved, only mesas and moonlit scrub brush. I scanned the motel facade, windows staring blankly back. Sergeant Ruiz hustled up. "What's 1039?" he asked. "My code for ejected subject." I pointed to the headboard scribble through the lobby door. "He carved it in there." Ruiz frowned. "We'll get EMS out here, secure the site. None of us sleep until this is resolved." I exhaled, tension seeping from my shoulders. Rain dripped from my jacket. Barnes joined me, flashlight trained on the desert. "Think he's lying?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "Number something's going on in that room." An EMT arrived, gloves snapping. They checked vitals, murmured for a stretcher. The guest kept staring back at the motel, lips mouthing, "Stay, stay." As they lifted him away, I walked to the cruiser, boots squelching. I wiped rain from the windshield. My radio crackled to life. "Dispatch to all units. Possible 1071 in progress. Highland Vista Motel. Maintain secure perimeter." I gripped the steering wheel. The rain drummed on the roof like static. I risked a glance back at room 12. Its window dark, blind to the storm. Because I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We walked back into the motel lobby just before sunrise. the sky bruised purple along the horizon. Sergeant Ruiz had already taped off the hallway leading to room 12. Barnes and I joined the crime scene technician, Klein, who carried an evidence bag full of motel fixtures, vent covers, cassette tapes, even a fragment of the headboard carved with "Don't Forget Us." "Let's get eyes on the room," Klein said, voice gravelly from lack of sleep. He toggled on his helmet lamp and led us beneath the yellow crime scene tape. I tightened my grip on my mag light, every nerve ending on fire. We entered room 12 through the unlocked door. The carpet still pooled with water near the bathroom threshold. Klein snapped photographs of the wet footprints. 2 sets, I noted, as though someone had limped in the dark. He bagged one vent cover, then went for the second by the bed. As he unscrewed it, I shone my light into the duct. Something caught my eye. A smear of dark red along the lower edge of the grill, almost as though the metal itself had bled. Klein frowned. "That's new. The MP took the original cover intact. Didn't see this on the initial run." He bagged the evidence. Barnes cleared his throat. "Sergeant wants us to check the tape recorder for playback." He lifted up the radio tape player, now evidence item number 7, and Klein handed him the cassette labeled June 14th. Barnes loaded the tape, pressed play. Static crackled, then a voice, not the tenant, but someone whispering directly into the phone handset. "Officer, they said you'd leave, but we heard you." A low hum, like breathing through a wet cloth. Come back, please." My pulse thundered. Even through the speaker, the tone was wrong. Too intimate, too hungry. Barnes hit stop. "This doesn't match what we heard on the intercom," he said. That was at least 3 voices, layered. Klein tapped his pen against the evidence notebook. "Log this discrepancy. Also, the cuts on the headboard, fresh gouges. Someone's been inside since we left." I caught my reflection in the cracked mirror, dark circles, unshaven. But I couldn't look away from the vent beneath it. I knelt and ran a gloved finger along the slick smear. Blood, I realized, not rust. Fresh. "Get samples," I ordered. Klein nodded and swabbed it. I scanned the room again. The cassette tapes from previous nights were gone, replaced only by the June 14th tape. The bathroom water was still running, though the sink faucet was off. A siphon had to be in place. I traced the supply line under the sink. Rubber tubing led to the shower drain, then disappeared beneath the floorboards. Barnes crouched beside me. Why rig the water? To cover something? Mask a sound? I stood. Or to drown something deeper in the walls. I crossed to the bed, kneeling beside the mattress. The sheets were tangled in a heap, but no signs of struggle. Just heavy impressions like someone sat there for hours. The headboard carving had another message I hadn't noticed before, faint beneath the first. "Please." I traced it with my flashlight beam. A sudden thump rattled the plumbing inside the walls above the bed. I jumped, heart in my throat. Barnes drew his weapon. We both listened. Another thump, slower, deliberate. It sounded like knocks coming from inside the wall itself. "Tap back," I whispered, raising my voice so Klein could hear. I tapped the plaster. 1, 2, 3. The wall seemed to vibrate in reply, almost like it flexed under an unseen hand. Barnes shook his head. "This is beyond me." Klein called over his shoulder. "I'm going to check under the floorboards." He backed toward the bathroom, prying up a loose plank with a screwdriver. Water seeped from the edges, soaking into the subfloor. He lifted back a board to reveal a narrow crawl space, its splintered wood slick with water. He shone his lamp down. A dark cavity, barely 2 feet deep, but wide enough for a person to crawl through. My stomach clenched. How many people fit in there? I asked. Judging by the width, 2, maybe 3 if they huddled, Klein said. But this looks older than the motel, original slab foundation. They'd have to tear a big hole in the drywall and floor. I nodded toward the vent. They did. I gestured to Barnes. Seal this for now. We need structural engineers before anyone goes in. Barnes swept the room one last time. What about the tenant? He asked. He's at county, terrified out of his mind. Finding him those 3 people in the walls changed him. I rested a hand on his shoulder. Maybe he wasn't wrong. As the forensics crew boarded up the vent and nailed down the plank, I stepped into the hallway. The early morning shift change buzzed through the thin walls. I called Marisol, the clerk, onto the landing. She looked pale as a sheet. I need you to detail everything you saw before you left, I said. She wrung her hands. I told you I saw him rocking in the corner. Anything else? I pressed. She glanced back at the sealed door. I thought I saw faces in the window. Not the guest's face. Smaller, shadowy, but it was raining so hard I couldn't be sure. Rain still pattered against the roof. I looked over my shoulder at the metal-grilled window high above the lobby door. You're sure? She nodded, eyes wide. I exchanged a look with Barnes. We need to get that window boarded up. We descended back to the lobby, and I radioed dispatch. All units secure Highland Vista Motel. No one in or out except crime scene investigators. I want perimeter secured until structural review. Heard the click on the radio. Orders would follow. I walked outside into the pre-dawn chill. The motel parking lot was deserted, except for our cruisers and the rain-slicked dunes beyond. I peered back at room 12's window, now boarded, and felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pressing in the darkness. Is this really just 3 people in the walls? Barnes asked quietly. I shook my head, numbered something else. Something preys on fear, and it learns. He frowned. Learns what? We'll find out, I said. I cracked the door of the cruiser and slipped inside, heart still hammering. Inside the console, I retrieved the motel's security log. They had a single camera pointed at the lobby, but no hallway cams. The log showed the hooded guest arriving at 0047 on June 14th, paid cash for 1 night. No other entries. The next line read, 0512. Maintenance called to check water leak, no maintenance present. Water leak? That meant someone else had cut the pipe and rigged the hose. I closed my eyes. We sat in silence while the rain washed the windshield. Barnes pocketed the security tape, labeled Lobby Cam June 14, 2047-0512. It was the only visual record we'd get. Dispatch wants a sit rep, he said, checking his watch. They're sending a team to Bristlecone Hospital to interview the guest again. I nodded. Do it, and run his prints through ACIC, see if he has any mental health calls on file. This crosses lines. Barnes leaned back, exhausted. Why do I feel like we're missing the point entirely? I turned to him. Because we are. We're treating this like a crime scene. But it's not just a crime, it's something else. At that moment, the cruiser radio crackled with static, then a voice I didn't recognize. Distorted, low. It said, "Don't delay us. We belong inside." I tensed. Barnes, did you just hear that? He tapped the speaker. Only static. I stared at the radio, dread pooling in my gut. We were only beginning to understand what inside meant. And once it invited us in, I knew there'd be no turning back. I looked at the motel's silhouette against the storm clouds. Through the boarded window, a faint shape moved. Too tall to be human, but unmistakably watching. I swallowed hard. We go back, I said, voice steady. "Tonight we finish this." Barnes met my gaze, resolution in his eyes. Together. And in the distant howl of the desert wind, I heard it again. Together. Never apart. We drove off toward the station, lights off, the Highland Vista Motel shrinking behind us, its heartbeat still echoing in our chests. We returned to Highland Vista just after midnight. The rain had ended, but the damp desert air still clung to our uniforms. Barnes drove. I rode shotgun, fingers tapping the dashboard. Behind us, 2 patrol cars, one hauling the structural engineer from county, the other carrying Klein and an evidence technician. I glanced at my watch. 0007, June 15th. Exactly 20 hours since our first entry into room 12. Barnes cut the engine in the lobby parking lot. We slipped out, boots soft against the gravel. The motel's neon vacancy sign hummed overhead, flickering like a dying eye. Inside, the corridor was silent except for the low police radio static we'd left on for recording. Sergeant Ruiz met us at the end of the hall, clipboard in hand. His face was set like stone. "Structure's sound enough for a targeted breach," he said. "Engineers ready." We nodded, weapons drawn but held low. Klein followed behind the engineer, an older man named Jacobs, wearing a hard hat and carrying a floodlight. Jacobs clicked on the beam. It cut through the darkness like a spotlight. "Ceilings and floor look stable," Jacobs murmured, sweeping the room. "But walls are thin. I'll need to open one section at a time." I slid the crime scene tape aside and met Barnes's eye. "You ready?" I asked. He swallowed. "As I'll ever be." We stepped into room 12. The air was colder here, despite the temperate night outside. Water still trickled from the bathroom drain, pooling on the sagging carpet. The headboard carving, "Don't Forget Us," glowed in the engineer's light, jagged and desperate. Jacobs knelt by the bed and marked a square on the drywall with chalk. He measured and drilled pilot holes, then tapped with a rubber mallet. I heard the hollow thud of space behind the wall, followed by a distant skittering, like fingernails on the studs. Barnes pressed his pistol against his thigh, flashlight beam dancing. "Dispatch to 4 Adam 12, I said into my radio. "We're breaching wall section Alpha. Stand by for possible entry." Static hissed back. "Copy, 4 Adam 12. All units, stand by." Jacobs lifted the drywall panel. Dust and damp plaster fell away, revealing a narrow cavity littered with shredded motel carpet and fragments of metal lath. A low moan echoed from within, soft, sorrowful, almost human. Barnes shone his light into the space. 2 pale faces peered back, pressed flat against the inside surface. Their eyes, sunken, glassy, tracked us. I inhaled and stepped closer. They were skin and bone, their cheeks sunken, ribs pressed against cloth. Their arms lay beneath them, folded as though in prayer. A thin stream of water trickled down from above, moistening their hair and clothing. "Get 'em out," I said, voice clipped. Barnes and I grabbed their wrists, pulling. The first body slipped free, brittle and cold. We laid it on the floor, the second followed. But when we reached for the third, his legs trembled and buckled. The wall itself stuttered, as though it were breathing. I gripped Barnes's arm. "Step back." At that moment, the vent behind us cracked. Metal shards tumbled to the floor. A shape emerged, a mass of limbs and wet fabric. It stumbled into the room, head lolling, twisting unnaturally. Its mouth was a line of black gashes. When it spoke, words gurgled up like choking water. "They left me. Don't leave me." Barnes fired one warning shot above its head. The bullet hit the ceiling and ricocheted, sparking dust. The creature recoiled, nostril sniffing the air, then lurched toward Jacobs. The engineer shrieked and stumbled back. His floodlight clattered to the floor, beam rolling across the walls. I leveled my pistol. On the ground, now! The creature paused, head tilting. Something flickered. Recognition? Then it twisted its torso and bolted toward the bathroom. Barnes and I sprinted after it, boots splashing through the water. The creature slipped through the bathtub door, leaving wet footprints across the tiles. We flooded into the bathroom. I checked the shower stall. Empty. Then I saw it. A honeycomb of jagged holes in the ceiling tile, through which a glistening arm reached down. I kicked out the tub's sliding door and scrambled onto the rim, pulling myself up. Above, the ceiling rattled. I shone my light up. 3 bodies dangled by twisted lengths of motel telephone wire. Their heads lolled, mouths open in silent screams. As I reached for one, the wire snapped. Body and wire tumbled, heaving water from the ceiling onto the floor with a thunderous splash. I leapt down, sliding across the slick tile. Barnes caught my arm. "Klein, get that thing away from the door," he shouted. Back in the room, the engineer was cowering behind the bed, flashlight aimed at the vent. The torn drywall piece, once a panel, lay on the floor like a fallen tombstone. Klein hovered by the damaged vent cover, hands shaking. "God help me," Jacobs whispered. They're fusing with the structure." I holstered my weapon. "Evac now. All non-essential personnel," I ordered. Sergeant Ruiz nodded and guided the engineer and technician out. Barnes and I remained, staring at the vent where the thing had come. Just as Ruiz closed the door behind the engineer, the walls shuddered. A low keening rolled through the room, like a choir of whispered regrets. The headboard carving glowed faintly in the darkness. "Please, stay, forever." I felt Barnes's hand on my shoulder cold. His breath came in ragged gasps. We exchanged a look. This was bigger than any crime. This was unholy. I knelt beside the bodies we'd removed. They were already stiffening, eyes milky. One reached out, limp fingers brushing my glove. I shuddered and pulled back. "Dispatch," I said, voice steady. 4, Adam 12. We have multiple fatalities, structural compromise, unknown entity. Recommend hazmat, SWAT, fire, First Amendment religious de-radicalization team. Hell, call everyone. Static crackled. "Copy. Command is dispatching all available units." We stepped back to the threshold. The motel hallway lay silent, crime scene tape fluttering like a broken heartbeat. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. As we exited, I paused in the lobby. I glanced at the security camera in the corner. It was blinking red. I tapped it. No feed. I yanked the phone cord from the wall. The jack was empty. Barnes leaned in. "We'll never explain this in a report." I nodded. "We won't try. Let's get this in the hands of people who deal with the impossible." We locked the door behind us and walked into the night. The motel receded into darkness, its windows like dead eyes. I shivered. Was it the desert chill, or the echo of those voices clinging to my mind? Back at the station, we filed preliminary reports. 4 deceased, 1 missing suspect, unknown cause. We tagged evidence, a bracket of drywall, 3 bodies, 1 vent cover, 1 cassette tape. But that night, as I lay in my own bed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in my apartment sounded like scratching drywall. My phone buzzed with unread messages, witness statements, engineer updates, medical reports. And then I saw it, on the blank wall opposite my bed, in fresh scars on the paint. 3 words, etched in the fading moonlight spilling through my window. "We are inside." I sat up, heart pounding. I ran to the wall. Nothing there. The paint was smooth. My apartment, built just 5 years ago, had no crawl space beneath. I backed away, hand on my service pistol. The room was empty, except for the faint hum of the building's AC vent. It rattled once, then twice. A whisper drifted through it. "Stay. With us." I froze. A cold dread coiled in my gut. Somewhere out there, in the walls, in the vents, in the shadows of every structure I enter, something waits, learning where the thin places are. And I don't know if I'll ever be free of it. I couldn't sleep that night. Every creak in my apartment sounded like fingernails scratching behind the walls. I lay on my cot, uniform still damp, radio clipped to the belt loop, replaying each moment at Highland Vista Motel in endless loop. Morning came too early. I should have called in sick, but Barnes and Ruiz needed me. The precinct smelled like stale coffee and burnt rubber when I walked in, business as usual. Nobody asked questions. By 07:30, I was poring over blueprints of the motel lobby, tracing the vents, the water pipes, the hidden crawl space under room 12. My hands trembled when I traced the outline of that third body dangling from the ceiling beam. Sergeant Ruiz intercepted me at dispatch. His eyes were bloodshot, voice low. "You're up." 1040s, he said, handing me the radio. He paused. "You all right?" I forced a nod. "Just tired." I keyed the mic. "All units be advised. No further civilian access to Highland Vista for the foreseeable future." As cartoonish as it sounded, I believed it. People should stay out. Something there was alive, and it was hungry. Barnes and I met in the break room. He'd skipped debrief. He looked haunted, too. We sat across from each other at the Formica table, 2 cups of strong black coffee between us. I watched him stir sugar with a shaking hand. "You hear it on your radio?" he asked. I nodded. "Last night, static, then a voice, not on our channels." He leaned in. It called my name. My stomach tightened. They called mine too. We stayed silent. Our next move, we had to secure the motel permanently. The higher-ups agreed, after the news hit every local station. I fielded calls from the media. Are there cults? Animals? Human trafficking? I fed them whatever line the department gave me. Under investigation. No further comment. But none of it touched the truth. That afternoon, we drove out in an unmarked SUV, 2 detectives and SWAT techs in tow. The motel loomed beneath dusty skies. We found the lobby boarded up, windows blacked out, police tape reinforcing the perimeter tape that still fluttered from 4 days ago. The place felt like a tomb. We assembled in the cracked parking lot while the techs set up remote surveillance cameras on tripods, their infrared lenses scanning every dark corner of the building. I walked the exterior wall behind room 12. The engineer's breach panel had already been welded shut, fresh weld beads glinting in the sunlight. I knelt and touched the metal. It was warm, not from the sun. I jerked back. Barnes joined me. "What is it?" he asked, voice low. I pointed to a thin line of solder that slithered from the panel's edge toward the foundation, trailing beneath the cracked concrete. It looked like a root, alive. The tech's cameras pinged, motion detected in the lobby hallway. I radioed our guys. 2 uniformed officers emerged, flashlights scanning through the taped windows. They were silent, gaunt. No water dripped from that bathroom vent anymore, but the echo of it, like the blood's pulse, still hammered in my ears. My phone buzzed. It was Marisol, the clerk from the motel. Her voice shook. I saw someone in my apartment building." She gave an address on Pine Street. I told Barnes, and we jumped into the SUV. By the time we arrived at her unit, dusk was bleeding into night. The building was quiet, only a few lights and windows. Marisol met us at 2B's door, keys in trembling hand. I locked myself in," she said. She had a bruise above her brow, a splinter of paint in her hair. I asked what happened. She wrung her hands. I heard voices, not in my head, on the intercom speaker, like they were calling to me. I covered my ears, but they kept whispering my name. She pressed the call button. The buzzer sounded, but no one on the other end. Then I moved to the hallway and saw 3 figures pressed against the lobby windows, staring. She gestured behind us at the glass door. We turned. The lobby lights were on inside the metal boards, pale and flickering. 3 silhouettes crouched at the windows, heads cocked. They didn't move. I drew my pistol. "Stay here," I told Marisol, voice steady, though my heart pounded. Barnes followed me without hesitation. We kicked the door open. The lobby was suffused with dusty yellow light. Debris littered the floor. Pieces of vent cover, twisted wiring, shards of cracked plastic from that old intercom, and on the ground a single cassette tape. We hadn't cleared this evidence. It lay between the rows of chairs. Barnes scooped it up. I aimed my light at the windows. The silhouettes were gone. In their place, someone had etched letters on the dust-smeared glass in uneven strokes. "Don't leave us." My breath caught. Barnes said, "It's like it's learning our names, our faces." I knelt to pick up the tape. It was unlabeled, smooth plastic. I clicked the reel with my thumb and heard, faintly, from deep within the motel walls, a voice, slow and taunting. "I'm here. We're here." My radio crackled. Dispatch, asking for our location. I answered, our precise coordinates, and then, "We have active pursuit. Suspects fleeing motel grounds." Outside, tires squealed. I rushed to the window. 2 men and a woman in dark hoodies tore through the parking lot, scaling the chain-link fence. They moved like wraiths. Barnes and I sprinted outside, drawing our sidearms. They darted across the desert lot like shadows. I shouted, "Police! Stop!" But they vanished behind the gravel dunes. The cameras in the lot recorded nothing. The tripod stood empty, lenses turned off. Barnes cursed. "How do you run faster than an SUV in the desert?" I rubbed my temples. The hot wind carried a whisper that seemed to suck all air from my lungs. "Don't leave us. Stay." We retreated to the SUV, radio blaring. We lost the suspects. I slammed the door. Marisol joined us, eyes wide with terror. They spoke to me," she said, "not with words, with memories." She pressed her temple. "They showed me things, places in the wall, behind doors I never opened." I looked back at the motel, its windows dark again. "We have to end this," I said. SWAT wouldn't hold them back. They weren't human. We needed fire, collapse the walls, purge every inch. Send in K-9 bomb squads, nuclear if possible. That night, at Incident Command, we planned a controlled demolition. We would bring down the east wing, isolate the core under room 12, seal it. Barnes felt guilty. If we collapsed the building, any evidence of what we'd done, what we'd become, would vanish. But Marisol's safety mattered. Lives were at stake. At 0300 hours, we watched from a safe distance. Charges were placed, wires snaked through the back entrances. I marked them off with caution tape. Barnes stood beside me, radio in hand. "Ready?" I nodded. He hit the detonator. The charges went off in a muffled series of pops. The east wing shuddered. Concrete groaned like an undertaker's door. Dust cascaded into the lot. I covered my face, heart hammering. As the plume rose, I saw 3 figures emerging from the collapse. Bodies intact, unscathed by debris. Barnes and I didn't register the heat or the acrid smoke. We stared. They walked toward us, perfect silhouettes against the orange haze. Marisol screamed behind us. Barnes knocked her down. I scooped her up and ran, carrying her away from the collapse. Behind me, the motel's east wing crumbled entirely. We turned a corner, and the figures followed, stepping around wreckage as though the charges had parted for them. I set Marisol down and raised my pistol. Barnes leveled his. The figures halted at the edge of the dust cloud. 3 forms, exactly like the ones we pulled from the walls, their skin gleaming, their eyes hollow. They tilted their heads in unison. One spoke, voice a chorus of hollow syllables. "You brought down the house, but we remain." In that moment, the ground trembled. A low rumble echoed, not the building collapsing, but something beneath the desert itself, shifting. The silhouettes advanced, step by slow step, as the dirt around us cracked and split. I glanced at Barnes, face ashen, and back at the 3. The air pulsed with static. Then, from somewhere deep below, a voice rose in unison. "We are in every wall, every structure, every mind." The fissures widened. One by one, they swallowed the silhouettes, consuming them in a swirl of dust and darkness. But I knew they would return, because they were bound to the earth, to the concrete, to the living. I kicked Marisol toward the patrol car. Barnes grabbed me. "Go, get her to safety," he yelled. I complied, diving into the passenger seat. He jumped in and slammed the door just as the ground split open behind us, a crack wide enough to swallow the entire motel. We peeled out, the SUV's tires spraying gravel. Dust choked the air. The collapsed structure vanished into a canyon that wasn't there 2 minutes ago. As we rounded the highway on-ramp, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The fissure glowed faintly, like embers smoldering in the earth. My phone buzzed again. Dispatch. I ignored it. Barnes exhaled, head resting on the wheel. What the hell do we call that? I looked back down at Marisol, her face pale but alive. "I don't know," I whispered, "but I know it's not gone." And somewhere in the desert beyond, where the earth had cracked open, I heard a distant whisper carried on the wind. "Thank you for staying." No question was needed now. We'd invited it in, deep into our world, our minds, our homes. The only real question left is, when it calls your name in the darkness, will you answer? I pulled into the Peachtree Inn parking lot just after midnight, the glow of my dash lights painting the faded pavement in sickly green. The lot was nearly empty except for a rusty pickup idling in the corner, its driver's window cracked open and the strain of country music leaking into the night. The neon sign overhead sputtered "vacancy" in uneven bursts, each flicker revealing the motel's peeling paint and boarded-up windows. I killed my engine and sat for a moment, listening to the hum of the highway just beyond the trees. Dispatch had relayed a 911 call from room 12. "Sounds like someone screaming," the caller said. "Please hurry." Stepping out, I cinched my jacket against a chill that smelled of damp asphalt and diesel fumes. My boots crunched gravel as I made my way toward the lobby, hand drifting toward the grip of my service pistol, though I knew the clerk wouldn't appreciate a drawn weapon in such a tight lobby. Inside, the air was stale, thick with the scent of bleach and old cigarettes. Behind the counter sat a woman in her 50s, slumped over a stack of reservation slips. Her hair was a tangled gray halo, and when she lifted her head, her eyes were red-rimmed and unfocused. She nodded at me without a word, voice caught somewhere between a whisper and a sob. I cleared my throat. "Ma'am, I'm here about room 12. My voice echoed against the linoleum floor and the mirrored wall behind her. She pointed to the right door leading downstairs, lips quivering. It's awful," she murmured. "I haven't heard such screaming in years." I gave her a curt nod and moved down the short hallway, each fluorescent bulb above me buzzing like cicadas trapped in a jar. I could feel my heartbeat thundering against my chest, the way it always did when I didn't know what waited on the other side of a closed door. At the foot of the stairs, I paused. The carpet smelled of mildew and something metallic, an undercurrent of copper that set my teeth on edge. I clicked on my flashlight and swept the beam across the peeling wallpaper, noticing a dark stain spreading toward the baseboard. My radio crackled. "Unit 4, be advised, call sign en route to your location." I exhaled slowly. "Copy that." I approached room 12 and knocked firmly. Once, twice. "Sheriff's office. Open up." Silence answered, punctuated by faint thumps and a low, ragged moan that sounded like someone trying to speak through raw lungs. I tried the knob. It was locked. I called again. "Room 12, we're here to help." The doorknob rattled almost imperceptibly. Then came a sharp, terrified sob, followed by a blood-curdling scream that sliced through the corridor. I drew my weapon, not because I expected gunfire, but because protocol demanded it whenever I encountered someone in crisis behind a locked door. My boots shifted on the carpet as I gave the door a firm kick. It cracked inward, wood splintering, and I breached the room. The sight that met me made my stomach twist. A woman crouched on the bed, clutching a stained rag to her arm. Her clothes were torn, and her hair plastered to her forehead. Across the floor lay overturned furniture and broken glass. The nightstand lamp was shattered, shards glinting in the flashlight beam. Her eyes locked onto mine, wide with panic and something darker, something feral. "Help me," she gasped, voice choked. "She's gone, she's gone." I kept my gun trained low, hands steady. "Ma'am, I need you to show me where she is. Slowly, okay?" She nodded, but couldn't stand. The rag slipped from her wrist, revealing a jagged gash leaking bright red onto the bedding. I hit the radio. "Medic on standby for a female with a laceration, possible self-harm." My partner's voice crackled back. "You got it." I moved to her side, scanning the rest of the room. In the bathroom doorway, I saw a black raincoat draped over the tub, droplets of something dark pooling on the tile. The mirror over the sink was cracked diagonally, rattling my reflection into jagged fragments. "Who is she?" I asked, voice calm but firm, leaning closer so she could see my badge. She rocked slightly, breath ragged. "My daughter," she whispered, each word a shard of ice. She walked out. Her gaze drifted toward the window, where the curtain fluttered despite the glass being intact. I followed her eyes and noted the shrubs pressed against the lower pane, branches scraping softly. Perfect tracks for muddy footprints, if she'd climbed out. I holstered my weapon and rose to my feet. "All right," I said, offering her my hand. "We're going to find her, but I need you to stay here and keep pressure on that wound." She squeezed my hand, tears brimming. "Thank you," she rasped. "I'm so sorry." I stepped back, already dialing my partner. "Dispatch, we have confirmed self-inflicted injury. Suspect vehicle may have fled on foot northbound toward the highway. Request K9 unit and perimeter check." As I spoke, I caught movement at the edge of the doorway. A small, pale face peered around the frame. Mud streaked across lip and cheek. My heart lurched. I trained my flashlight on the figure, a little girl, maybe 7 years old, eyes glassy but alert. She took a hesitant step forward, toeing the threshold, staring up at me with an expression that twisted between relief and something else, something unreadable. I crouched, keeping my tone gentle. "Hey, sweetheart, did you hide here? Are you okay?" She tilted her head and whispered, "He said to stay." The hairs on my neck prickled. I scanned behind me, no one else in the room. The mother tensed beside me, hand flying to her ragged wound. I rose, radioing again. Unit 4, we have found the juvenile. Negative per weapon, but she's acting off. I need backup. My voice wavered as I watched the girl drift forward, close enough that I could see the cut on her wrist, matching her mother's. The lights flickered. In that instant airy dim, I heard it. A whisper, so faint I thought I'd imagined it. Help me. The moment the bulb came back, neither mother nor daughter was in their initial spots. The woman lay collapsed on the bed, rag still in hand, eyes shut. The girl was at the bathroom mirror, tracing a spiral crack with her fingertip. I raised my radio. Medic now, and send every available unit. My heart pounded in my throat as I edged toward the bathroom, boots silent against the carpet. Inside, the girl stared at me, lips moving as if reciting a prayer. Her eyes glazed, void of recognition. The raincoat lay crumpled on the floor, wrapped around something heavy. I inched closer, flash and gun sweeping in unison, ready for whatever came next. And then, high-pitched and hollow, the voice came again. She's gone. I called to her, but she didn't turn. Instead, she lifted the raincoat, and I saw a pair of tiny shoes, caked in mud, and a shape curled beneath them that made my blood freeze. I swallowed hard, mind racing with every drill I'd ever learned about shielding innocent life and confronting the unthinkable. Lights danced on the tiles. I braced myself for that instant before a crisis erupts into chaos, the calculated moment when duty and terror collide. I edged into the cramped bathroom where the little girl knelt beside the overturned raincoat, the beam of my flashlight catching flecks of rainwater on the tile floor. My radio lay forgotten in my hand as I took in the scene. The girl's small frame silhouetted against the cracked white subway tile, her threadbare nightgown stained with dirt and, worse, blood. With every slow step I took, the staccato clicking of my boots on the linoleum seemed impossibly loud. "Hey," I said quietly, keeping my voice low and calm despite the adrenaline roaring in my ears. "It's okay, you can come to me." The girl didn't flinch. Her gaze was fixed on the limbs of something dark beneath the raincoat, a shape that lay still, unsettlingly still. I swallowed, whole world narrowing to that silent mass on the floor. I knelt carefully beside her. "I need you to stand up, sweetheart. Come here." My outstretched hand trembled. She turned her head slightly, hair falling over one eye, and nodded, just the barest inclination. I reached out to help her to her feet, but before my fingers touched her elbow, she sprang up on shaky legs and backed away, eyes frantically seeking escape. "Don't move," I said firmly, raising one hand in a calming gesture, the other still gripping my radio. "Just stay where you are." A moment's hesitation, and then she bolted past me, racing out of the bathroom. I leapt to my feet, heart hammering, and chased her back into the bedroom. The overhead light flickered. Furniture lay scattered, a dresser toppled, clothing strewn across the floor, a lamp shattered to splinters. The woman, her mother, still lay on the bed, faintly moaning, raggy breaths rattling in her throat. I cut across to the little girl, crouched now beside the bed, head bent over something on the mattress. I shone my light. Blood had pooled beneath the child's fingers where she knelt. I realized with a jolt that in her hand she held a small metal key, one of the ignition keys to the mint green minivan idling outside. The realization was instant. The girl had unlocked the van to hide again. She'd practically orchestrated her own rescue. But then I saw what she had been inspecting. A smear of tiny footprints leading away from the bed, toward the open window. They were so small, so precise, like someone had traced them by hand. I felt a chill. "Who left these?" I whispered. The girl looked up at me, half-smile spreading across her face. "She did," the child said softly. I followed the footprints with my flashlight beam to the window, now ajar, settling dust and threadbare curtain in gentle waves. I peered outside. Moonlight glinted on the highway beyond, but the shrubs below were dark silhouettes, hiding any clue. My radio crackled. "Unit 5 en route. Medics ETA 2 minutes." I exhaled, stepping back inside, fists clenched around the radio. "Copy that." I turned to the girl. "Do you know where your mom is?" She tilted her head, cocked her hip, and shrugged. She was here, then she left. My jaw clenched. "Left?" I repeated. "Where?" She didn't answer, only dipped her chin toward the door leading to the next room, room 11, where we'd taken the report of a second disturbance. My partner, Officer Jameson, rapped on the door. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4. Stand by for possible additional entry," I warned as I switched on my taser, holstered my sidearm. Jameson and I exchanged a look, silently agreeing to clear room 11 before dealing with this escalating situation. Together, we edged through the doorway. Room 11 was nearly identical to room 12, but for the disarray, an overturned suitcase, clothes scattered like a tossed deck of cards, and on the bed where clean sheets ought to lie, 2 empty pill bottles rolled toward the footboard. A single photograph lay face down on the pillow. When I flipped it over, I recognized the girl's mother and an unfamiliar young man, arms wrapped around her waist, both smiling. The girl's father, perhaps. A dull ache bloomed in my chest. "Jameson, we need to check the closet," I murmured, nodding to the chipped wood doors. He swept his light across the hinges, neither locked nor barred. He yanked it open to reveal, empty except for a pile of towels. I exhaled. My breathing felt shallow. My radio crackled. Medic on scene. I dashed back into room 12. The mother lay pale and trembling. A medic knelt beside her, applying a sterile bandage. The little girl clutched the ignition key tight, her gaze flicking between the medic and her mother. The mother's eyes opened, glazed and unfocused. "She told me to fix it," she whispered, voice weak. She said if I didn't, she trailed off, trembling. "Tell me about she, ma'am," I urged gently, kneeling beside her. She closed her eyes and shook her head. I don't remember." The medic glanced at me, concern etched in her features. I pressed my lips together. Procedure demanded I secure everyone before excavating the trauma. "Ma'am, we'll talk later." I glanced at the little girl. "Honey, do you want to stay with your mom?" She nodded, but didn't move. She kept staring at the window, as if listening for someone outside. I crouched to her level again. "We're going to take you both downstairs, okay? You can sit with Mom and we'll find out what happened." She stood, clutching the key, and with each step toward the door, I saw that her skin was smeared with dirt and dried blood, like she'd crawled through the shrubs outside. I gestured for Jameson to escort us down the stairs, rear cover, taser in hand. The hallway lights flickered as we passed. The carpet looked darker now, as if stained, though I could see none in the dim glare. Once in the lobby, paramedics led the mother and daughter toward a waiting ambulance. I stayed back, eyes flicking to the lot outside, where the minivan's engine still idled, headlights cutting slashes into the darkness. A forensic team had arrived, barriers sealing off the motel entrance. I approached the lead detective, Ramirez, handing her my flashlight. "Got a key," I said. She used it to open the van. I pointed outside. Ramirez nodded. "We'll do a full sweep, but I want you and Jameson to prepare your statements. And Mr. Hawkins," she looked at me, "I need you to stay sharp." I'm not convinced this is a simple missing person. I exhaled. Understood. That night, I sat in the break room off the sheriff's office, cup of scalding coffee in hand, trying to steady my thoughts. The photograph from room 11 lay on the table between us, face up now, showing the mother in happier times with a man whose absence felt like a question mark suspended over the entire case. Jameson slid into the chair opposite me, exhaustion lining his face. "You think it was the dad?" he asked quietly. "Maybe he took off with the kid and Mom flipped, thinking she was protecting her." His theory sounded plausible until I remembered the footprints and the doll, and the way the girl had whispered he said to stay. I shook my head. Number something else. Jameson frowned. "You mean, you think there was another person here? I don't know." I hesitated, then pushed the photograph toward him. "Look at the background. That's not the Peachtree Inn. It's another motel, the Evergreen, down Highway 41. Same neon sign, same peeling paint." His eyes widened. "You think this has happened before?" "I'm pretty sure she's done this before," I said, "and I'm pretty sure that if we don't find out who she is, it's going to happen again." Outside the window, headlights swept past, and for a brief moment I thought I saw the little girl's silhouette standing under the Peachtree Inn sign. Vanished in the next instant. I drained my coffee, the bitter burn a reminder that some stories don't end when you close the case file. They follow you. They plant seeds of doubt that sprout at 3 a.m., long after everyone else is asleep. That night, as I loaded my car to head back to the station, I couldn't shake the feeling that the Peachtree Inn's vacancy sign was an invitation, and that somewhere down that lonely stretch of asphalt, another scared mother, another child, and another madwoman waited for me to arrive. And I wondered, what would I do if it happened again? The sun had barely crested the horizon when I pulled into the lot of the Evergreen Lodge, heart still pounding from the previous night's chaos at the Peachtree Inn. My cruiser's engine idled while I paused at the threshold, watching the pale morning light reveal fresh scratches along the chipped paint of the neon sign. Like Peachtree, this was a roadside relic on Highway 41, the same layout of 2 single-story wings flanking a small parking area. The same faded wood paneling, the same promise of cheap shelter and latent menace. I stepped out, pulling my jacket tighter against a damp breeze that smelled of pine and gasoline. Inside the lobby, fluorescent tubes flickered in a slow, methodical pulse. A middle-aged man behind the desk looked up as I entered, eyes bloodshot and weary. No neon flicker in his gaze, just exhaustion. I flashed my badge. "Sheriff's office," I said, voice low. "I'm here to follow up on an incident." He sighed, running a calloused hand over his stubbled jaw. "Right, you're the 3rd officer this week." His tone was defeated, like he'd been expecting yet another disturbance. "Room 6, same thing. Screaming. Broken glass. Police had to kick the door down." My pulse accelerated. "Any injuries?" He shrugged. "She got cut up a little. She was shouting about someone taking her baby." He paused, eyes flicking to the back office. "Kid was gone when we got there, just like the others." My stomach clenched. "Others?" I echoed. He nodded toward a framed collage on the wall. A tourist map of local motels, their names circled in red marker. Peachtree Inn, Evergreen Lodge, Pinecrest Court. His finger traced the path between each. 3 calls in 5 nights, he said quietly. Each at a different motel, same story. Mother claims someone took her child. Kid disappears, room trashed. They find the mother in shock, and when officers arrive, the kid's not there. I absorbed every syllable. The pattern was impossible to ignore. 3 motels on the same stretch of highway. Same M.O. a missing child, a traumatized mother. The suspect, always a woman, mentally unwell, bloodied, raving. The girls in rooms 6, 12, 11 vanished. "Show me exactly what happened in this room," I said, stepping past him. The corridor beyond was narrow. The carpet stained a darker shade under the overhead lights. Room 6's door stood ajar. I raised my flashlight, sweeping across the threshold. The rug was rent open, foam tufts scattered like cotton in a gale. A twisted lampshade lay on the bedside table, its bulb cracked. In the corner, a small suitcase sat open, clothes half removed, strewn across bed and floor. I crossed the threshold, walking slowly so as not to disturb any possible evidence. The air reeked of stale perfume and dried blood. I crouched beside the bed, tracing the edge of a crimson smear that streaked across the white sheet. It vanished under the dresser toward the bathroom. I flicked on my gun light, following the trail. Inside, the sink was cracked, water still dripping once, twice from the faucet. A black raincoat, identical to the one I'd found at Peachtree, draped over the tub rim. My breath caught as I recognized the pattern. The same raincoat, same size, same brand. Whoever this was, she wore it every time. I rifled through the pockets, empty. No ID, no notes, nothing but lint and a stray hair clipped to the lining. I holstered my weapon and tapped my radio. "Unit 4 to dispatch. Have you pulled license plates on that green minivan spotted at Peachtree? Any hits?" Static crackled. Finally, "Negative so far. Owner of record says vehicle's been reported stolen twice. Once in 18, once last month, and never recovered. No suspects." I closed my eyes, running a hand over my forehead. Understood. I stood and returned to the main room, hunting for the mother. She sat on the edge of the bed, knees pressed to her chest, arms wrapped tight. She peered up at me, eyes hollow, voice a rasp. "She's gone," she whispered. She was here, and then gone. "Ma'am," I said gently, kneeling to meet her gaze, "do you remember anything? Anything at all?" I offered my hand, but she shook her head. Behind me, my partner Jameson entered, nodding once to acknowledge the situation. "Medics are on scene," he murmured. He handed me a notepad. "I've taken her statement. She doesn't know where the girl went." I scribbled in the margins. Date, time, license plate unknown, MO matches previous. My pen paused as I noticed her right hand resting on the bedspread. Clutching a small porcelain doll, eyes gouged out, head cracked. The same doll motif. Another piece in this macabre puzzle. I pocketed the doll. "Let's secure the room," I said, voice professional, though my mind churned. "Forensics will take it from here." Jameson shut the door behind us. In the hallway, I paused, flashlight sweeping. "We need to canvass outside," I told him. "Check local businesses, back roads, anything. Someone must have seen her." He nodded. "On it." I walked back into the lobby, the desk clerk watching me with wary eyes. "Detective Ramirez is en route," I told him. "Stay here and let no one in." He nodded, voice quiet. "Good luck." Outside, the morning was soft with mist. The gravel lot was empty except for my cruiser. I slung on my radio and called out, gathering officers. Each unit fanned out. North toward the service station, south toward the rest area, east into the pine grove that bordered the property. I took the northwest quadrant, flashlight and boots, gliding over wet needles and underbrush. A sharp snap of a twig halted me. I spun, sweeping the beam, nothing but trees swaying. I called out, "Bergen 4, check in." My voice sounded hollow. No reply. I crouched to examine the ground. There, the same tiny footprints pressed into the loam. A girl's shoe prints, leading deeper into the pines toward the highway embankment. They were small, precise, as if laid by design. I followed, heart pounding with adrenaline and dread. The prints led me to a culvert beneath the asphalt, partially hidden by ferns. I knelt at the edge, staring into darkness. My radio crackled. "Unit 8, I see something down here," I said, voice clipped. "Request cover." I shone the beam into the tunnel. Past slick stones, the walls slick with moss, liquid pooling at the far end. I inched forward, boots slipping. The light caught something pale, glinting. I froze mid-step. A tiny sneaker lay half-submerged in the water. Beside it, a strand of blonde hair. My chest tightened. I reached out with gloved fingers, lifting the sneaker. It was mud-caked, but unmistakable. The same style the girl had worn at Peachtree. I straightened, turning as footsteps crunched behind me. Jameson crouched beside me, gun in hand. "What is it?" I held up the sneaker. "It's her." He glanced into the tunnel. "Shit." "Tell dispatch we've found evidence of the child's passage here," I said. "K-9 unit to Central Pine and CSI. Prep for recovery." Jameson was on the radio before I turned back to the tunnel mouth. My flashlight swept inside again and caught something dangling from the ceiling beam. A doll's dress, soaked and torn, threadbare. My stomach revolted. Jameson's voice crackled. "Kitten, be advised. Looks like blood on the sneaker." I swallowed hard. "Copy." I looked out at the looming pines beyond, branches interlacing like skeletal fingers. So far, I'd found a doll, a raincoat, footprints, a sneaker, but no child and no suspect. All that remained was a darker question, not who, but why. The detective arrived then, Detective Ramirez, face drawn. She took in the scene with a single nod. "Spread out," she ordered. "This motel's on lockdown. No one leaves until we know what happened." I straightened, shoulders aching from exhaustion. I glanced at Jameson. His jaw was set, eyes grim. Ramirez turned to me. "You think it's the same woman?" I hesitated, then, "Yes. And I think she's been moving this way. Highway 58 to 41, leaving behind the same terror." She drew a line in the dirt with her boot. "What's our next move?" I closed my eyes for a moment, heart racing. "We find her before she strikes again, and we find the girls she's taken." She nodded. "We start at Pinecrest Court, 10 miles east. They reported a screaming woman 3 nights ago. Didn't call us until dawn." I met her gaze. "Let's go." As we climbed back into our vehicles, the morning sun burned through the mist, casting long, skeletal shadows across the gravel. I took one last look at the Evergreen Lodge sign, its letter E flickering out. Then I rolled forward, siren silent, adrenaline guiding me toward Pinecrest and whatever horrors lay ahead. The highway stretched out ahead of us like a ribbon of gray asphalt melting into dawn. Jameson drove in silence, headlights still on against the lingering mist, while I mulled over the pattern we'd uncovered. 3 motels, 3 traumatized mothers, 3 missing daughters, and 1 woman, always wearing that raincoat, always leaving behind the same porcelain doll. By the time we hit Pinecrest Court, the sun was burning off the fog, revealing a cluster of single-story units with pastel siding and manicured hedges that felt out of place in this stretch of rural highway. We pulled into the lot and killed our engines. Pinecrest Court was quieter than the others. No neon signs, no humming fluorescent bulbs, just the soft rustle of wind through ornamental grasses and the distant hum of a generator. I clicked on my flashlight and stepped out, boots crunching on the gravel. The air smelled faintly of fertilizer and cigarette smoke. Here, too, was the pattern. Unit 3's window cracked open, drapes fluttering. A small paper sign taped to the front door read, "Room 3." the same room number reported in the dispatch notes. Jameson took point, pistol drawn but low, sweeping the beam across the row of doors. "Clear?" I whispered. No answer except our own breaths. We hit the door once, no response, then used a key from dispatch's master set. The lock clicked. Inside, the room was neat, too neat. Fresh towels folded on the bed, paperwork neatly stacked on the desk. No overturned furniture, no obvious signs of struggle. Yet the carpet was streaked with dark smears that led to the bathroom. I followed the trail, heart thumping. Every motel had a similar smear. Blood, we assumed, and each trail ended at the tub or sink. In Pinecrest's bathroom, the sink faucet dripped a thin, rhythmic patter that felt like a heartbeat. I knelt, tracing the smear to the drain. The drain was clogged with dark hairs and clumps of what looked like cotton from the doll's stuffing. I rolled up a glove and rooted through the mess, pulling out a handful. Straw-colored hair, synthetic fibers. It matched the doll. "Got something," I said into my radio. "Evidence of the suspect. Send CSI." Jameson cleared the bathroom and opened the medicine cabinet. Inside, behind antiseptic bottles, lay a tattered raincoat sleeve. Same brand, same lining. He held it up. Tiny flecks of dried blood dotted the cuff. I felt my stomach churn. We backed out into the main room. A small wooden crib rested against the far wall, its mattress bare except for a single splintered toy car. I flicked on my gun light again and found, taped beneath the crib's corner, a photograph. A smiling mother holding a young girl by the hand, standing before this very motel's sign. The woman in the photo wore the same yellow sundress I'd seen in room 12. The little girl had the same face as all the missing children. Whoever kept this photo had planned it. I tucked the photo into an evidence bag. Jameson secured the raincoat cuff. We moved back toward the door when a soft creak echoed behind us. I spun, light whirling, nothing. But the atmosphere had shifted. Shadows pooled in the corners. Even the air felt heavier. We stepped outside into the neon glare of our cruiser's lights. I called dispatch. "Units, perimeter check complete. We've got the doll bits and the raincoat fragment. No sign of the girl or suspect. Recommend canine unit here ASAP." "Copy that, Unit 4. ETA canine in 5 minutes." As we waited, I scanned the lot. A maintenance shed sat at the edge of the property, its door ajar. I noticed muddy footprints leading away from the back of the building and toward a narrow path through overgrown shrubbery. My gut told me this was the route the suspect had taken, and likely where the child had vanished. Jameson and I approached the shed cautiously. Inside, a chain-link cage sat empty, its latch hanging open. Beneath it lay a length of frayed rope and a soiled rag. I picked up the rag and smelled it. Musk, sweat, something acrid that reminded me of tear gas. Whoever this woman was, she'd brought tools and possibly weapons. Outside the shed, the path snaked into the trees. The canine unit arrived, and a handler released a black German shepherd. The dog's nose hit the ground, tail stiffening as it picked up the scent. I watched the dog slip into the underbrush, disappearing from sight. Then the handler barked a command, and the dog's paws slapped against the dirt, rustling leaves. Jameson radioed. "Handler says scent is strong. Dog's heading northeast." I nodded. "Let's move." We followed at a jog, flashlight beams cutting through the low branches. My mind raced with questions. Why were these motels so close together? Why this relentless pattern of abduction and terror? Who was she, and what drove her? Each motel felt like a stage set for a ritual. Same lighting, same decor, same nightmare. The path opened onto the shoulder of the highway. I peered down the guardrail and spotted something half buried in the gravel. A single little shoe, its ribbon untied and frayed. My heart lurched. I lifted it. Muddy, scuffed, unmistakably child-sized. No, Mother leaves a shoe behind unless something violent happened. Jameson glanced at me, pale. "There's more," he said, crouching. Beneath the shoe, scratched into the asphalt, were letters. "Help." The grooves looked fresh. I traced them with a gloved fingertip. They trembled under my touch like the letters themselves were crying out. I looked up at the highway, cars roaring past in both directions, oblivious. Here, on this indifferent ribbon of asphalt, a child had asked for help. And we'd found it. Too late, I suspected. Jameson spoke softly. "Son of a..." I stood, clutching the shoe. "Call it in," I ordered. "We need everyone here. Block the road if you have to. CSI, medics, tell them to prepare for the worst." As we backed away from the roadside, the dog burst from the trees, barking furiously, nose pointed down a culvert entrance that led beneath the highway. Rainwater dripped through the concrete slats above, pooling at the bottom. The dog growled, hackles raised. I trained my flashlight down into the tunnel. Darkness swallowed the beam after a few feet, but in that glow I saw, just beyond reach, a small pale handprint smeared on the wet wall, fingertips trailing down the moss. It looked like blood. My radio crackled, "Unit 4!" But I cut in. "Get me a harness and rope. I'm going down." Jameson's eyes widened. "Are you sure?" I swallowed. "We don't have time. That's where she took her." He stood by as I clipped on a harness and lowered myself into the culvert. Water lapped at my boots, cold enough to sting. The flashlight trembled in my hand, illuminating slick stones and the imprint of small footprints disappearing into deeper black. Behind me, Jameson's voice echoed faintly. "Be careful." I crawled forward, every drip and echo magnifying in my ears. The air grew dank, the tunnel narrowing to a crawl space. I crawled on my belly, the light bobbing ahead. Then I saw her, sprawled in the shallow water, wrapped in the raincoat, curled around that same doll, its cracked face pressed to her cheek. My breath froze. The little girl's eyes were closed. I shone the light on her wrist, no pulse. Tears blurred my vision. Footsteps behind me. Jameson's coming down after me. He knelt beside me, flashlight hitting the doll first, then her face. "Jesus Christ," he whispered. I unzipped the raincoat, exposing the child's small frame, wet and pale. I reached out to check her pulse again. Nothing. My chest tightened until I could hardly breathe. The water around us rippled, though nothing moved. I looked up at the tunnel's ceiling and saw, traced in grime and slime, the same spiral crack motif I'd seen in the motel mirrors. A faint voice echoed off the walls, too faint to understand. Jameson tapped me on the shoulder. "We need to get her out." I nodded, but a cold dread seeped through me. My radio crackled with frantic voices above. I grabbed the doll, pressed it to my chest, and whispered hoarsely, "We've got her." As Jameson strapped the girl into the harness and hauled her upward inch by inch, I lingered in the darkness a moment longer, staring at that spiral crack overhead. It seemed to pulse, beckoning. Then I followed, rising into the morning light with the weight of the world, and one broken porcelain doll in my arms. The case file was no longer just numbers and bullet points. It was a child's wasted life. I stepped onto the grass beside the highway, raincoat doll bundle in hand, and wondered how many more mothers would come screaming through these motel doors before the spiral ended. I sat in the interrogation room long after midnight, the fluorescent lamp overhead humming like an exhausted generator. My uniform was still wet from the culvert's icy water, mud crusted on my knees, where I'd knelt beside that lifeless girl. The porcelain doll lay on the stainless steel table between us, its cracked face turned toward the ceiling, the spiral crack in its forehead staring back like a wound that would never heal. Detective Ramirez had already taken 2 statements from me, one for the homicide report, one for internal review, and neither had captured the weight of what I'd seen in that tunnel. The way her small hand lay limp against the slick concrete, the way the raincoat clung around her shoulders as if someone had folded her into a final embrace. I rubbed my eyes, trying to blink away the vision. A knock sounded on the door. "Come in," I said, voice thick. Officer Jameson slipped inside, closing the door softly behind him. He carried a steaming cup of coffee. "Thought you might want this," he said, handing it over. I wrapped my fingers around the styrofoam cup. The coffee burned my palm but cooled against my lips. I took a slow sip, letting the bitter warmth settle in my chest. "Thanks," I managed. He settled into the chair opposite me. "Ramirez is reviewing the CSI photos," he said. "She wants you to look over them before tomorrow's briefing." Jameson's voice was quiet, cautious. "You okay?" I met his eyes. "No," I admitted. "I'm not okay." The confession felt foreign on my tongue. I keep replaying it, her face in that water, the way the crack in the doll matched the crack in her skull. I closed my eyes. It's like she was waiting for me to find her. Jameson leaned forward. "You did everything right. We followed protocol. We found her. At least we know what happened." I shook my head. We don't know what happened. We know the outcome, but not the why. My fingers traced the doll's spiral crack. Why here? Why now? Why us? He was silent, sympathy in his eyes. "Ramirez wants a meeting in 10. Get some sleep if you can. We start early." I nodded, drained. He stood, heading for the door. "Try to rest." Once he left, I stared at the doll. It was absurd. I'd been trained to see evidence, not to let an inanimate toy unnerve me. But there it was. A silent witness to a child's last moments. A harbinger of terror in those motels along the highway. I gathered my things and walked down the corridor to the locker room. The station was deserted except for a janitor wheeling a cart near the elevator. I paused in the hallway's flickering light, noticing for the first time a smear on the cinder block wall. A streak of something dark, like dried ink, that trailed down in a spiral pattern. My pulse skipped. I blinked hard. It couldn't be. A trick of the fluorescent glare. Inside the locker room, I peeled off my jacket and laid my soaked uniform against the steam of another officer's dryer. As the machine thumped to life, a sudden chill hit me. I spun to face the row of metal lockers. One locker door creaked open on its own, swung just a few inches, as if inviting me in. My breath caught. I stepped closer. The locker was empty. No gear, no jacket, nothing. But the interior was scrawled in thin, jagged letters. "Help me find her." The message was scratched into the metal with a fingernail or a knife, though no blade lay nearby. My throat constricted. I snapped out of it, shaking my head. Likely someone else's prank or something. I replaced the locker door and walked back to my desk. Ramirez's voice crackled on the PA. "Detective Kitten, room 2. I followed the pale green hallway back to her office, where she sat behind a cluttered desk, case files stacked high around her. She looked up as I entered. "Glad you're here," she said without preamble. On her desk lay a ledger, old, leather-bound, its pages yellowed. "What's that?" I asked. She tapped the cover. "Found it in the Peachtree Inn's front desk drawer. Been there for who knows how long. Should have been on the lost and found rack, but it wasn't. It was tucked away, like someone hid it." I opened the book. Inside were hand-drawn maps of each motel: Peachtree Inn, Evergreen Lodge, Pinecrest Court, and others I didn't recognize, all connected by a spiral line. Below each map was a name and date. 4 dates, 4 names, children's names. At the bottom of the page was another date, tomorrow's date. No name. Ramirez pointed. Looks like she has a next target, and she writes them down. I felt bile rise. Why would she plan this like a ritual? That's what I want you to figure out, Ramirez said, voice low but firm. We're dealing with organized, whatever this is, it's not random. My mind raced, the spiral motif everywhere, the cracked doll, the scratched wall, the tunnel, ceiling, an obsession, a symbol. But of what? A cult? A personal vendetta? Something older, darker? Ramirez slid the ledger across. I need your eyes on this. Go through each name. Find any connection between them, the mothers, the hotels, something she used to choose. I closed the book, heart pounding. On it, I returned to my desk, empty except for a flashing computer. I logged into the files, cross-referencing the 4 victims. Girls aged 6 to 9, taken at intervals of 2 nights. Mothers with no criminal records, each admitted to psychiatric evaluation after the incident, then released. Motels owned by different operators, none connected. Victims from different hometowns, none originally locals to this county. But then I noticed a line. Each family had a past disappearance, someone missing in their extended family decades ago, a great-aunt here, a cousin there. Cases long cold, perhaps forgotten by everyone but the mother. I leaned back. Was the motive vengeance? The suspect knew about these old tragedies, but how? And why bring it back now? I cross-checked local newspapers. The old cases had made the front page once, but details were sparse. I circled one. 1978, a little girl vanished from Pinecrest Park, never found. The mother at the time was a different woman, a school teacher. But the lodging, one of the elder motels on Highway 41, was across the road. Could this be the origin? And now, 47 years later, my radio crackled again. Unit 4416 call at Silver Pine Inn. Looks like another screaming woman, red carpet, barred windows. I grabbed my coat. On my way. By the time I arrived at Silver Pine Inn, sirens were just dying down, casting the building in streaks of red and blue. The small parking lot was full of cruisers and ambulances. I ducked under the crime scene tape and found Detective Ramirez at the door, flashlight in hand. Looks like she stepped it up, Ramirez said. This room's on the 3rd floor, room 3, exactly the same number as Pinecrest, but a room number she skipped until now. I nodded. She's marking a pattern. We made our way inside. The hallway was silent except for the hum of waiting engines below. Room 3's door was sealed. I knocked. Sheriff's office. Nothing. The knob was locked. We kicked in the door together. Inside, the scene was different. The bed was untouched. The floor was clean. The tub was empty. But on the vanity mirror, scrawled in lipstick, was the spiral symbol, perfectly drawn, curling inward to a dot at its center. Beneath it, next. My breath caught. I shone my flashlight around. No occupant, no victim, no suspect. Just the lipstick swirl and an empty room. Where is she? I whispered. Ramirez stepped forward, touching the mirror with gloved fingers. She's in control. A sudden breeze rustled the curtain, though the window was closed. The mirror fogged slightly, like someone exhaled behind us. Then another message formed. A pair of handprints outlined in steam, tiny, the same size as a child's. Beneath the prints, "Join her?" My heart seized. I felt the officer's radio call out, "Officer, down at the pool area." We dashed back to the hallway. The pool, an indoor atrium adjacent to the lobby, was flooded with moonlight through a skylight above. Lights from the ER vehicles outside filtered in too. Through the glass door, we saw a figure slumped on the tile deck, blue-white under the spotlight. A little girl. Alive, but unconscious. Face submerged in a shallow puddle dripping from the broken fountain above. Fresh blood swirling in the water. I burst in, holstered my pistol, and cradled her head. She coughed and sputtered, eyes wild. Ramirez knelt to check her wrist. No pulse. We slapped her back until her chest heaved. She vomited water and blood. I called, "Paramedics." They rushed in, stabilizing her. I knelt beside them, gripping the spiral-cracked doll I'd pressed into her tiny fist, and watched as they loaded her onto a gurney. The child's eyes darted open, focusing on me with a clarity that twisted my gut. She squeezed the doll so tightly it cracked another line across its cheek. "Help me," she whispered, voice halting, so small against all the chaos. I looked up at Ramirez. Her jaw was tight, eyes fierce. "It's not over," she said. I nodded, mouth dry. I realized then that we were caught in something far beyond a simple spree of abductions. The spiral was a calling card, an invitation to something we didn't understand. And every message, every stolen child, every broken doll was a step deeper into someone's twisted design. Weeks later, I'm still working the case. The little girl at Silver Pine Inn is recovering, physically at least, but the hospital reports say she's already slipping into that same dazed expression, eyes unfocused, lips whispering of "mama" and spiral. The detective files mount by the day. Autopsy reports, witness statements, forensic analyses. But none of them account for the spiral motif carved into hospital doors, or the doll that showed up in the psych ward elevator at Central Medical with a new crack in its forehead. Last night, I came home and found my daughter's music box broken on her bed, the spiral pattern etched into its lid. The dancer's figure shattered. My heart slammed. She's 12, too old for dolls, but the box was her favorite. Inside, her name was written in my own handwriting. Someone had been in my house. Now I sit here, balancing an overturned coffee cup on my desk, the spiral ledger open before me. Tomorrow is the date that was blank in those old pages. Tomorrow is when she planned the 5th abduction, and maybe the final recital of her ritual. I stare at my daughter's music box on my nightstand, its lid wedged open at a crooked angle. The spiral on its surface seems to move in the lamplight, drawing me in. I close my eyes, hearing that faint whisper echoing in my skull. "Help me. Join her." My phone buzzes, an alert from dispatch. An anonymous tip about a new motel just off the turnpike. A vacancy sign flickering in the rain. A mother screaming inside room 5. Tomorrow. What happens when the spiral returns home? What price will we pay when the cycle closes? I slid open the chipped metal door of Detective Ramirez's office just after dawn. The spiral-etched ledger cradled in my shaking hands. The sky outside was pale and empty, but inside, the room felt charged, like the air before a storm. Ramirez looked up from her desk, eyes rimmed with exhaustion, and something I couldn't name. Fear, maybe, or grim determination. "Morning," I muttered, lowering myself into the chair opposite her. "I've cross-checked the names from Silver Pine with missing persons reports. There's nothing, no prior connection. We're back at square one." She lifted a thick file. "Not quite," she said, tapping the cardboard cover. "CSI dusted for prints on the mirror lipstick and the spiral in room 3. No usable prints, but they found fibers, wool, synthetic, dyed dark green." She handed me a small evidence packet. I pried it open, a single thread, coarse and worn, the color of pine needles. My pulse thudded against my ribs. I'd seen that color before, on my daughter's favorite sweater last winter. "Green," I whispered. pressing the thread between thumb and forefinger. Where else? Ramirez's eyes fixed on me. At the interrogation room, your locker. I closed my eyes against the memory of that gaping scratch scratched into steel. Help me find her. The chalky grooves had been too deliberate, too personal. Someone had been inside my locker. Not just any perp, someone aiming to terrorize me. We're out of time, Ramirez said. She's on to you. I stood, my chair scraping the tiled floor. My daughter. The words fell out in a rush. That music box, the spiral pattern on it. Someone broke into my house. Ramirez rose, palms flat on the desk. Then you know what you have to do. I drove home through streets coated in morning mist, hands tight on the wheel, mind numb. Every red light felt like a countdown, every passing car a threat. When I turned onto Maple Avenue, the sky had bled into a pale gold, but the world looked muted, drained of warmth. I pulled into my driveway and froze. The front door stood ajar. I kicked it open, radio drawn, ready for a fight. The hallway was dark, silent, too silent. I flicked on the hall light. My daughter's room lay beyond the archway, door wide, pink curtains swaying. I slipped inside. Her bed was made, plush toys lined like a silent audience. The music box sat on her nightstand, lid cracked open. I knelt, heart pounding so loud I could feel it in my throat. The spiral pattern carved into the wood was fresh, deep gouges where soft maple met steel. And inside, instead of the dancer, a torn piece of paper scrawled in childish handwriting. Mama, help me find her. My breath caught. I reached out, cradling the box, my fingers tracing the spiral. A whisper echoed behind me, soft, insistent, so close I could feel its breath. I spun, pistol raised. No one, just the hallway, empty and cold. My radio crackled. Unit 4, disturbance reported at Maple Motel, half a mile north. Female screaming. The dispatcher's voice was clipped. Caller says it's the same M.O., your closest. I bolstered my jacket, shoved the music box into my coat pocket and raced back to my cruiser, lights and siren off. I could feel the spiral at my back, twisting tighter with every heartbeat. The Maple Motel sat under a sky that threatened rain, its neon vacancy half lit in a jaundiced glow. The parking lot was empty except for my cruiser and a battered sedan. I flicked off the engine and held my breath. The air reeked of wet asphalt and something darker. Fear, I thought, but also something metallic, like blood. I drew my weapon and approached the lobby. The clerk, a young man, maybe in his early 20s, stood behind the desk, eyes wide. He pointed toward the stairwell. Room 5, he whispered. She's in there. My boots clattered on the steps, each echo bouncing down the narrow shaft of concrete and wood. I reached the door, knocked once. Sheriff's office. My voice sounded brittle. I tried the doorknob. It turned. Inside, the room was bare except for a single bed and an overturned chair. A woman crouched in the corner, arms wrapped around herself, humming softly. Her hair was green at the tips, faded like evergreen needles. She raised her head. Her eyes were glassy, pupils so large they swallowed her irises entirely. She tilted her head, humming that same spiral tune I'd heard in my nightmares. "Ma'am," I called softly, sliding down to one knee. "Can you show me where the child is?" No response, only that gentle hum curling around me, like a lullaby. I holstered my weapon, pulled out the music box, and set it on the bed with care. The spirals carved on its lid matched the ones dancing in the mother's eyes. I clicked it open. The tiny dancer's music box tune wheezed out, slow and distorted, like she'd wound it with a dying hand. The woman's humming faltered. Her head bobbed, eyes flicking to the box, then away. I watched her throat bob as she swallowed. "That was my daughter's," I said, voice low. "Do you know her?" She stood, arms unfolding, and listened. The music box tune echoed in the dull overhead light. She stepped closer, every movement precise, deliberate, like she'd practiced it in front of the mirror. She tilted her head until our eyes met. Then, softly, she whispered, "She's with me." My heart froze. The music stuttered, gears grinding. I glanced at the closet door, ajar. A small shoe lay halfway inside, the Velcro strap undone. I flicked my light inside, a tiny handprint on the closet wall, fingers splayed in the spiral shape. I waved at the clerk in the hallway. "Call medics and backup, now." I unsnapped the music box lid. "I need your daughter back," I said to the woman who wasn't a woman. "Tell me where she is." She cocked a green-tipped brow. "She's behind the mirror." I swallowed and stepped to the dresser's mirrored door. The reflection glimmered, and for a second I saw a hallway behind me, maple planks instead of carpet, my daughter's face pressed against the glass, eyes wide. Then the door swung inward. A girl, my daughter, fell into my arms, soaking wet, shivering. Relief and horror slammed into me. She clutched the doll I'd tucked in my coat. "Daddy?" she whimpered. "It's broken." I hugged her tight, pressing her into my chest, eyes locked on the mother, no, the stranger, who watched us with that same spiral gaze. She raised a finger to her lips in a hush, then vanished, slipping between the door frame like smoke. Behind me, the daughter whispered, "She tried to make me stay." I squeezed her hand. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. I looked down at the doll in her small fist. Its porcelain face now bore a new crack, spiraling out from the forehead. The music box tune continued to tinkle, though I'd long since closed the lid. I set the doll on the dresser. It spun of its own accord, turning until the spiral crack aligned with the groove in the wood. My daughter peered over my shoulder, eyes wide with a knowledge no child should have. I rose, holstering my empty weapon. "We're getting you out of here," I said, voice steady even as my insides coiled. I turned to my partner who'd just arrived at the door. "Secure this room. Forensics. We're tearing this place apart." As I led my daughter down the hall, she reached up and brushed her fingers along the spirals chipped into the paint. "Is she gone?" she asked. I paused, heart lodged in my throat. The neon vacancy sign outside flickered faintly through the window, an empty promise. I looked at her, at the doll we carried between us, then at the hallway, where shadows pooled like hungry eyes. I swallowed, for now. But as I turned back toward the exit, I realized the music box's last notes were still playing, faint, insistent, and drawing me back. And I knew that this spiral, this pattern of terror, wasn't done with me or with my daughter. It was just beginning. What will happen when the next spin comes for us? It was just after 2 a.m. on May 14th when dispatch broke through the silence on my radio. Unit 17, Nightingale Inn, Code 8, Suspicious Circumstances. Clerk reporting noises behind vacant room walls. I thumbed the mic. Copy that. And eased my cruiser onto the shoulder of Interstate 40. The desert night wrapped around me like a cold shroud. Stars glinting overhead, wind stirring tumbleweeds like restless phantoms. My heart drummed with a familiar mix of adrenaline and fatigue. 12 hours on shift leaves you wired but drained. Eyes heavy, senses sharpened against sleep. Pulling under the neon arch of the Nightingale Inn sign, its faded pink glow sputtered in the darkness. The lot was half empty. Only a handful of battered sedans and pickup trucks scattered across cracked asphalt. The lobby's single window flickered. Inside, the receptionist sat hunched behind the desk, shoulders tense, eyes bright in the weak fluorescent light. I grabbed my flashlight and badge, stepped out of the car, and called out, "Arizona Highway Patrol, Deputy Carter." The clerk looked up, pale, voice low. "Thank God you're here. It's room 12. They said it's been out of service, but last night I heard scratching, like something digging through the drywall." She offered me the keys on a tarnished hook. I clicked on my flashlight and crossed the lobby. Each step echoed against the linoleum floor, scuffed, sticky, smelling of stale coffee and cleaning solvent. The logbook lay open to May 12th. No entries past that date. No record of any guest in room 12 for weeks. I pushed through the heavy oak door into the narrow corridor. The wallpaper peeled in damp curls. Floral patterns faded to yellow stains. The carpeting underfoot felt damp and worn. I could see dust motes swirling in my beam. Room numbers marched past, 10, 11, then 12. No light beneath the door, no welcome mat, just silence. I knocked once, hard, and waited. My knuckles stung. No answer. I knocked again, louder, nothing. I jiggled the doorknob. It turned easily, swinging inward with a faint creak. I radioed dispatch. Entering room 12 alone. No visible occupant. My voice sounded flat in the narrow space. Inside, the air was heavy, warm, stale, tinged with mildew. I swept my flashlight across the bed, rumpled sheets, but no body. The nightstand held a half-drunk cup of black coffee, its surface rippling with steam. The old TV in the corner glared static, the screen cracked. Ghostly shapes dancing in the white haze. An orange glow from the vending machine in the lobby bled through the vertical blinds. I swallowed and stepped in, mindful of every loose board underfoot. I checked the closets first. The main closet door hung off its track. The rod was empty. No coat, no luggage, nothing. The bathroom door stood half open. I eased in, flicked on the light, bulb hanging by its wires, casting sickly shadows. The sink bowl was scratched, the mirror streaked. I leaned closer. My reflection looked gaunt, eyes ringed with exhaustion. I heard it then, a faint shuffling, like fabric brushing against metal, coming from the wall behind the toilet. I trained my beam on the vent cover above and saw scuff marks on the plaster. My pulse spiked. I knocked on the wall. "If someone's in there, step out or I'll come in after you," I said, voice steady but low. The shuffling stopped. For a moment, nothing but the hum of the air conditioner. Then a soft, deliberate tap, 3 quick knocks, directly behind the bedside panel. I holstered my taser, drew my sidearm, and approached the wall. The panel there was a thin rectangle of plywood, clearly a repair job. With a grunt, I pried at one corner and the panel swung inward a few inches. Darkness yawned behind it. My flashlight caught a glint of fabric. I stuck my arm through and felt rough denim. I pulled back and shouted, "Hands where I can see them!" A raspy breath answered me. I felt my own breath catch. I pried the panel fully open and swept my light inside the cavity. A man's face stared back, eyes wide, pupils blown, sweat streaking down his cheeks. His hands were clasped together in front of him. I barked, "Arizona Highway Patrol, get out here!" He froze. I stepped forward, flexing my fingers on the grip of my pistol. The man's eyes darted to the floor, then flicked back to mine. Slowly, he emerged, chest heaving. He didn't speak. I cuffed him behind his back and eased him into the room. His jacket slipped from his arms onto the carpet with a soft thud. Underneath, all black clothes that blended into the shadows. I led him into the corridor just as backup arrived. 2 patrol cars sliding in, lights green and white painting the walls. The clerk peered around the corner, horror widening her eyes as she saw him in cuffs. Hands pressed to the desk, I dropped the man on his knees. My flashlight beam shook with the tremor in my hand. He looked at me and whispered, "I thought nobody came." I radioed dispatch, voice clipped. "Suspect detained. Stand by for transport." The shift had gone from routine to surreal in minutes. But as I turned back to the door of room 12, flickering overhead, it swung closed behind me. No wind stirred, no one else in sight. I reached out, metal was cool under my fingers, but the inside was empty again. The panel where I'd pulled the man out was freshly sealed, the gap sealed over as though it had never been opened. My backup stood behind me, flashlight beams crisscrossing the corridor. I met their eyes, searching for some explanation. The suspect's cell phone lay on the nightstand, his fingerprints smeared across the screen. We checked it. No messages, no contacts saved, just a single photo. The cracked neon sign outside, time-stamped 3 nights ago at 2 a.m. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert breeze. I told the other deputies to process the scene. I radioed dispatch again. No record of any room 12 reservation, no calls logged past mine. But the coffee cup was still warm. I watched the steam curl from it, tasted dust and adrenaline in the air. I knelt to pick up the cup, and that's when I heard it. A faint whisper from inside the walls. Not a voice I recognized, something older, quieter, calling my name, drawing me back to room 12. My own name, breathy and distant. I dropped the cup, it shattered at my feet. The corridors stretched longer than I remembered. Every step echoed, every shadow seemed to twist. I patted my vest, radio dead, heart pounding. The back door to the kitchen. I remembered where it was. I headed toward it, only to pause as the whispering rose to a chorus of voices. Panicked murmurs, pleas for help, laughter that wasn't joy. I froze, flashlight swinging, sweat beating at my temples. Room 12's door creaked open from the inside. I swallowed hard, tensed for what might emerge. The door swung wide on its own, slow and deliberate, revealing nothing but shadowed emptiness. My flashlight beam cut a narrow path into the dark room, illuminating peeling wallpaper and a mattress stained dark at its center. My breath caught in my throat. The whispering chorus behind the walls had ceased, replaced by a heavy, expectant silence. Every instinct told me to back out, but I couldn't. I stepped inside. My hand trembled as I swept the light across the floor. Footprints, bare, damp impressions, led from the threshold straight to the nightstand, then vanished beneath the bed. I crouched to inspect them. They were too small to be mine, and they glistened with moisture that smelled faintly of rust and rot. My skin crawled. I stood abruptly and aimed my torch at the bed itself. The sheets had been pulled back neatly, as though someone wanted the bed to look unoccupied, but the mattress sagged in the middle, as if bearing an invisible weight. I eased forward, every nerve screaming, ears straining for the faintest sound. The hallway light outside flickered, casting the slats of the blinds onto the floor like prison bars. My radio crackled dead. No backup voice, no dispatch confirmation, only my own shallow breathing and the hum of the ancient air conditioner. I whispered to myself, stay focused, evidence, procedure. But inside, panic bloomed, a cold finger drumming against my spine. I circled the bed, shining my flashlight under it. My beam caught something metallic, a small, tarnished locket resting among the dust bunnies. I picked it up, flipping it open to reveal a faded photograph of a woman's face. Eyes terrified, lips parted in a silent scream. My heart thumped. I recognized the motel clerk's voice warning me, but I didn't recall seeing her check into this room. My gloved fingers trembled, so I dropped the locket back onto the carpet with a muted click. Then I heard it. A soft thud coming from the adjoining wall near the closet. I froze and swallowed hard. The shard of plywood behind me quivered. The panel I'd sealed now bulged outward like a breathing chest. I raised my gun and called out, "This is law enforcement. You need to show yourself." Silence. I flicked off my flashlight to preserve night vision and watched the wall in near darkness. Moonlight filtering through the blinds painted mottled patterns across the floor. Slowly, the panel slid inward, as though drawn by unseen fingers. A hand emerged, pale and thin, followed by an arm. I leapt back, drawing my weapon, finger on the trigger. "Arizona Highway Patrol," I yelled, voice echoing. "Hands up, show me your face." The arm stilled, then retracted. I saw movement behind the wall, shadows shifting, breathing. Then suddenly, the panel slammed inward with a dull thud, leaving only the flat surface of plaster. My heart thundered. I pounded the wall with my fist. "Come on, you can't hide from me." No answer. Only the distant hum of traffic on the interstate and the soft drip of water somewhere beyond the ceiling. I gripped the flashlight, ready to break open the panel with my boot, but paused, torn. If I broke through, what would I face? A person? Something else? My game face snapped into place. I drew my taser, not lethal, but enough to incapacitate. I took a deep breath and aimed at the seam of the panel. One shot, and the whole thing would blow open. As I counted to 3, though, my mind flashed to earlier. The coffee cup steaming on the nightstand with no one to drink it. The clerk's voice insisting no one rented this room. The footprints leading right beneath where the locket had sat. The more I thought, the more doubt gnawed at me. Was this a trap? Had someone deliberately lured me here? I holstered the taser, replaced my gun, and retraced my steps to the door. Something inside me balked at violence without certainty. I radioed, still dead. I flicked the hallway light switch, barely brighter than a candle, and pushed the door open. Behind me, the static on the TV, inside, crackled to life. The opening chords of an old radio drama. Voices shouting, a thunderclap. I turned, pulse spiking, but the TV cut out, leaving only blank screen and the echo of those voices in my head. I stepped into the corridor and locked the door behind me, using the motel key to ensure it sealed properly. I rubbed my arms, cold sweat running down my spine. The suspect I'd cuffed earlier was gone. Patrol cars sat idle outside, engines off, deputies staring at me like I'd lost my mind. I told them, "Room 12, something's in there." They exchanged glances. One rookie dared, "But we searched it, nobody inside." His voice trembled. I looked back at the door. I heard it, felt it. The panel moved on its own. Together, we forced the door. It swung inward smoothly. Room 12 lay empty. No coffee cup, no bed impressions, no locket. Even the TV was gone, just a blank nook with cables dangling from the wall. The floor was swept clean. The only thing left was the faintest odor of stale smoke. I squared my shoulders. We call this in. We lock it up, bolt it down. My voice came out steadier than I felt. But inside, confusion churned. Procedures ripped apart by paranormal possibility. We escorted the rookie through the lobby. The clerk was gone, the desk empty. As we passed the vending machine, its orange light buzzed overhead. We heard a click and looked up. The Nightingale Inn sign outside turned from pink to black for a beat, then flared again. No wind, no power outage. The sergeant radioed dispatch from the parking lot. The line crackled, then chirped alive. Unit 17. Status? Sergeant Daniels here, he said. We're securing room 12. No sign of suspect, no guest registered. We're pulling security footage. Dispatch. No cameras installed, no footage. He blinked. Repeat? No cameras. No footage, no calls logged. I frowned, looking up at the star-flecked sky. Then the sergeant's hand went to his radio mic again. And the sergeant's name isn't... My radio barked before he finished. Dispatch to Unit 17. Subject detained in room 12 is Officer Carter. Repeat, Officer Carter. I froze. My blood turned to ice. That's me, I whispered. Stay where you are. Dispatch cut in. Backup en route. ETA 5 minutes. I glanced at the sky, then across the lot at my cruiser. Its lights were still on. Keys were in the ignition. I'd never left the engine running. Heart pounding, I walked back toward the lobby, sense of time unspooling. The door to room 12 loomed ahead. My reflection flickered in the glass. 2 versions of me, one in uniform, one in motion. I raised my hand to knock, ready to declare my identity and reason. The door shuddered and swung open before I touched it. Inside, the TV played that radio drama again, voices crying for help. The mattress lay clean, the locket on the nightstand. I picked up the locket. Inside, the photograph had changed. It was a picture of me, sitting behind my desk at the station, eyes wide, mouth open in silent terror. The date, etched on the back, read, May 20th, 2025. 6 days from now. My radio crackled once more. Unit 17, do you copy? I didn't answer. I dropped the locket and stepped back. The room went dark. The door closed itself with a long, slow creak. I blinked. The corridor was empty. The sergeant's radio fell silent. My breath rasped in my chest. I looked down at my reflection in the polished floor. The face staring back at me showed no fear, only resolve. I reached out and placed my hand on the door handle. I drew in a ragged breath and stepped over the threshold once more, the door clicking shut behind me with a resonance that felt like a verdict. My flashlight beam wavered, casting long, skeletal shadows against the warped hallway walls. The air smelled of dust and old sweat. Every breath felt heavy, like inhaling decades of stale motel secrets. My heartbeat thundered as I clutched the locket in one hand and my gun in the other, the weight of both instruments anchoring me to reality. Somewhere beyond the peeling floral wallpaper, I could still hear that low, insistent hum, the motel's own pulse, or something darker animating it. I advanced, each footstep slow and deliberate, listening for any sound that belonged to the natural world. The corridor stretched unnaturally long, the lamps overhead flickering in sequence as though they were breathing. When I passed rooms 10 and 11, their doors gaped open, revealing nothing but empty beds and shredded curtains. No furniture had moved, no evidence of passage. Yet I could feel presence, something lingering just beyond the edges of my vision, slipping in and out of the shadows. The locket felt warm against my palm. I flipped it open again, and the photograph stared back. My own face, eyes wide with the same terror I felt now, mouth frozen in a silent scream. My name and badge number were etched faintly on the metal frame. Deputy Ezra Carter, May 20th, 2025. My breath caught. My pulse slammed against my throat. I closed the locket, determined not to believe what it implied, until I spotted fresh footprints in the thin layer of dust at my feet. They were small, shoeless prints leading toward room 12's door once again, as if I, or someone wearing my shoes, had just passed this way. At the threshold of room 12, the temperature dropped. My exhalations hissed out in vapor clouds, and I realized I wasn't just sweating nerves anymore. I was freezing. I tucked the locket into my pocket and placed my hand on the cold doorknob. My glove trembled. For a moment, I thought about radioing dispatch, but the channel was dead. No static, no crackle, just oppressive silence. I pushed the door open and shone my light inside. The mattress was gone, replaced by a single wooden chair turned to face the wall. A thick rope coiled neatly on the seat, its end frayed. The coffee cup sat on the floor beside the chair, empty now, but I could still see the ring of dark stain where it had rested. On the wall in front of the chair, scrawled in what looked like smeared ash, were the words, "I know what's coming." My heart stuttered. Who had written that? And why? I looked at the rope and felt bile rise in my throat. The room felt like a trap, an invitation to confession or destruction. I swallowed hard, forcing my fear down so I could think. I edged forward and knelt beside the chair. The rope felt brittle, as though it had been here for decades. I brushed my fingers along the fibers and realized they were warm, freshly disturbed. Someone had been here, right before me. I stood and scanned the room again. The panel on the opposite wall was intact, no gap, no sign of entry or exit. My prisoner, if he was ever here, had vanished, or perhaps he was still inside, hidden by some deeper secret. A soft creak behind me made me spin around. My flashlight beam darted to the closet door, half open once more. I approached, every muscle tightened. The smell of damp earth and something coppery, blood, wafted from the darkness beyond. I flared my light inside. Nothing but spilled toiletries and rumpled hangers. Yet the floor beneath was scratched, as though someone had clawed at it. I crouched, shining the beam along the baseboard, finding shallow gouges that formed a jagged line toward the back corner. A muffled thump from behind the walls echoed through the room. My own voice came out in a trembling whisper, "Show yourself." No answer, only the hum of the ancient HVAC sputtering to life. Then I heard it, my own voice, faint, pleading, "Help me." I froze. That was my voice, but from where? I pressed my ear to the plaster. The wall felt alive, vibrating with the echo of my past and future selves. I stepped back and realized my flashlight's battery was dying. The beam sputtered. Panicked, I fished out a spare from my pocket. 2 more bars of light. I clicked it on, stripes of brightness carving through the gloom. The rope on the chair quivered, as though caught in a breeze I couldn't feel. I edged closer, hand hovering over my holster. Then, on the seat of the rope-laden chair, I saw my badge, pinned to the wood by a rusted nail. It gleamed, even in the low light, its number matching mine exactly. I swallowed, vision swimming. The locket, the photo, the badge, each a signpost pointing me toward some destiny I didn't want. I hefted the chair with effort and moved it toward the door, intending to block any sudden assault from behind. As I shifted it, the rope slid off, uncoiling and wrapping around my boot. I yanked my foot free, yanking the chair back into place, only to catch a glimpse of a figure in the corner of my eye. A silhouette pressed flat against the far wall, limbs folded wrong, face obscured by shadow. I swung my light and gun in tandem, voice rising. "Stop! Show your hands!" The shape dissolved into the wall, or perhaps it ducked behind the panel. I lunged forward, prying the panel once more, but it stood firm, no seam, no gap. My light swept the room and settled on a single playing card lying on the floor. The Joker, brand new, corners crisp. Written on it in looping black ink were the words, "Your turn." My vision snapped to the ceiling vent, where the metal grill was bent outward, like jaws waiting to clamp shut. I stepped back, heart pounding so hard I thought the world would shake. My radio clicked alive, unexpected static blooming into dispatch's calm voice. "Unit 17, are you there? Please respond." Relief washed over me. I clicked the mic. "Dispatch, this is Deputy Carter. I'm in room 12. I need immediate backup." The line went dead again. My own words echoed in the empty motel room. I dropped to one knee, head spinning. Everything I knew about reality felt fractured. I reached for my phone, no signal. My watch showed 2:06 a.m. On the locket's face, the date glowed. May 20th, 2025, 6 days away. Something was pulling me forward in time, or here, or both. Footsteps echoed in the hallway, slow, deliberate. Not mine, not backup. Someone was coming. My flashlight flickered. I stood, weapon raised, trembling. The door handle rattled. I trained my light on it. It swung open. A figure stood there, backlit by the hallway light. Tall, limp posture. Head tilted at an impossible angle. I couldn't make out a uniform. Only the badge glinting at its hip, the number matching mine. My blood ran cold. The figure stepped inside, moving without sound. I shouted, "Stop right there!" But my voice cracked. Its head turned toward me, slowly, as though burdened by every second it had endured. There was no face, only a smooth, pale expanse where features should be. I fired a warning shot. The bullet thudded into the far wall, chipping plaster. The figure halted, absorbed the impact, and kept coming. In a haze of adrenaline, I stumbled backward. The rope chair clattered over. I vaulted onto the bed frame, scrambling toward the window, but the blinds wouldn't budge. The figure hovered at the threshold, stretching impossibly tall in the dim light. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, but swallowed them down. I fumbled for the locket and threw it at the creature's feet. It bent down, the motion too slow, too mechanical, and stared at the locket. Then it looked back at me. In that moment, I recognized the shape in its form. Me, or what I would become if I never left this cursed room. My own voice welled up inside my skull. "Why?" I whispered. The creature cocked its head. And then I realized this wasn't an enemy. This was an echo, a memory of the future trapped in the walls of the Nightingale Inn. I felt my legs give out. Sliding down the bed frame, I sank to the floor, weapon useless in my trembling hands. The creature extended an arm, or what passed for an arm, and pointed at the door. It spoke with my voice, soft, haunted. "Go back, before it's too late." The hallway light flickered once more. I looked away from the creature toward the door, toward the path I'd already walked and the path I must still choose. My radio was silent. The motel sign outside buzzed and dimmed. Somewhere behind me, a whisper. "Your turn." I scrambled to my feet, heart hammering. The creature materialized behind me, its presence pressing like a weight. I didn't turn. I crossed the room in a single stride, yanked the door open, and bolted into the hallway. I did not look back. Now I stand outside room 12, breathing hard, flashlight beam dancing over the peeling wallpaper. The sergeant's voice crackles through my radio at last. "Ezra, report!" I grip the mic, knuckles white, and choke out, It's not over." It's not. The line goes silent again. I realize there are two ways out. Forward, into the unknown hallways of this motel, or back through the door into that chamber of echoes. I can't go back. I can't stay here. My foot crosses the threshold toward the parking lot, but my heart feels rooted to this place. And as I move, step by unsteady step toward my cruiser, I know that whatever I do next will define not only tonight, but what May 20th brings. Is it a warning or a promise?